Okay, hello. Welcome back to the pod, the Movies for Breakfast podcast. I'm your host, Christy. Today we're talking about One Battle After Another, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. Now, let me just address the elephant in the room, which is that this video is delayed. I'm just kidding. Probably nobody noticed, but if you did and if you were looking forward to an episode from me, I'm sorry. I kept getting really nervous to record this episode because I wanted just like a full free day ahead of me, knowing that it might take a little bit longer. I'm going to do what I always do, and if you're new to the podcast, that is, I give a spoiler-free rating and review, and then I will give a spoiler warning before I get into a detailed plot synopsis with all the spoilers, and then through discussing the synopsis in detail, I will get into a deeper analysis of the film as well. I don't know how you're listening to this episode, but it is always available on whatever podcast streaming service you use, and if it's not, let me know. I can add my RSS feed, and it's also available as a full-length video on YouTube at Movies Number 4 Breakfast, and I also have a TikTok at Movies the Number 4 Breakfast. I should have an Instagram, but I've been too chicken. I know. I need to get over myself. If I can just have a second to mention something, for anyone who listened to my F1 episode, the F1 movie episode, either the OG raw voice note that I uploaded as my first test episode of this podcast or the polished redo that I did more recently, I am not going to be psycho and do a third iteration, but my obsession with F1 has escalated in a scary and concerning way since then. Every time I reach a new level of understanding, a new level of enlightenment in Formula One, I get more mad at that stupid fucking movie. And I just want to double down, triple down on every mean thing I said about the movie. I meant it, and I mean even more, even worse. Okay? All right, let's get into the spoiler-free rating and review. I do feel like most of my audience has probably already seen this movie, and so you should just skip to the spoilery review section, go into the episode description, find the timestamp for the spoiler full section, and just skip there. I gave this movie 5 stars. I wish I was one of those people that was like, that's really rare for me. I rarely give out 5 stars. But if you look at my Letterboxd in the last couple months, or if you go through my podcast episodes, I feel like I've given a couple of movie 4 and 5 stars. And it's not because I'm not critical. First of all, it's movie season, so the best, most, Oscar beat movies are coming out this time of year. I guess I've just been feeling generous towards movies lately. Maybe it's part of the maybe it's part of my disillusionment with tech and AI right now. And so I feel like maybe I'm being more generous towards human art because I'm just happy that it's still being made. I feel like we need to talk about art if we want good art, and it can't just be snarky making fun of garbage TV shows on Netflix. I try really hard to mostly cover things that I like, or at least respect. And that's why you'll see a lot of positive ratings from me. Anyway, I gave One Battle After Another 5 stars. I really like Paul Thomas Anderson. I loved There Will Be Blood. I watched There Will Be Blood with my mom, maybe during COVID, I'm not sure, but it was at home with my mom, and we have really similar taste in movies, and we love to watch a movie together and kind of dissect it. So I remember watching that with my mom in silence on the couch, and then we looked at each other after the last scene, and we were just like, whoa, that's a movie, I didn't like Licorice Pizza, but it was not so offensive to me that I gave up on PTA. Henceforth, Paul Thomas Anderson is PTA, both because it's so much easier to say and because I think it's kind of funny, the idea that he would be a parent-teacher association. At first, when I saw previews for this movie in the theater, I kind of ignored it because, to be honest, I have a thing with Leonardo DiCaprio, where I just really don't like him. And it's irrational. It's the kind of thing where you're just sick of seeing someone in everything. I never grew up watching or loving Titanic, so I didn't understand the Leo as a heartthrob, how cute he was when he was young thing. I primarily knew him from The Wolf of Wall Street and The Revenant and all of that, where he just annoyed me. I found him pretentious and overhyped. And then also I know him from pop culture, from how he's infamous for dating much younger women constantly, women 25 and under, no matter how old he gets. And that's really unlikable to me as a 26-year-old woman. So that was my impression of Leo, and it just seeped into every movie he was in. I couldn't buy into him being cool or suave or hot, because in my head I'm this guy is creepy. But because everyone was saying no, this movie's really good, it's worth it, I was whatever, I'm not gonna let him stop me from a good movie. And it won me over. He won me over. I think he was actually hilarious in this. I really enjoyed his performance, and it has, to some extent, affected my opinion of him in a positive way. So to his agent, PR team, manager, I think this was a really good move. In terms of genre, I would put this movie in action, thriller, drama, comedy. I mean, it had a lot of different elements to it, and it was all done beautifully. The characters were flawed and layered and complex, sometimes likable, sometimes not. The villains were abhorrent, but very interesting. The setting was very present. The action scenes, the chase scenes were done perfectly. I'm very, very picky about action movies because I like action movies. I actually like action movies a lot. Like, some of my favorite movies involve a lot of action. But the second I'm confused about something that is not intentional, like the second I'm confused about something that was supposed to be a straightforward scene, I'm kind of out. Because, sorry if you can hear Suki like chewing on her paw. I'm kind of out because like it's not fun anymore. And I also often have a hard time with action movies because it's like a bunch of white men in similar looking cars, and I'm not being funny. Like, I have a hard time keeping track of who's who. Yeah, One Battle After Another did really great in those scenes. I was engaged, I was entertained, and I was like on the edge of my seat. I think some people had criticisms about the pacing, but I actually thought the pacing was perfect. It didn't feel like a long movie, even though it is a long movie. And that's another thing I'm really strict on when movies are long. Like, I am critical of that, but I think it earned every minute of runtime. There were so many moments that I laughed out loud. I went to see it alone for the first time in the theater, and then I watched it again with two of my friends the other day. The first time I went to see it, it was like very soon after it premiered. It might have even been premiere day, and those are the best audiences because those are people who bought the tickets like pretty far in advance and like really care about movies, and everyone was laughing and like reacting, and it was just so much fun. The cinematography was beautiful. There was a lot to get out of the cinematography, but it was also just beautiful and enjoyable to watch. Especially, I mean, as everyone is talking about, the car chase scene. If you saw the movie, you know the one. I mean, people specifically told me to go see the movie just because of that car chase scene. So good. The score was really good. Like, really good. I think it was my favorite score I've seen since Challengers. And the Challengers score, like, changed my life. So that's saying a lot. There was this constant kind of, like, heart palpitating piano. It was just beautifully done. I thought Teyana Taylor was incredible. I haven't seen her act in anything else, so I like wasn't comparing it to anything previously, but I think she was the perfect casting. She was incredible to look at, so beautiful, but also like so, her like physicality as an actor, the way that she walked, the way that she held a weapon, the way that she like sexually interacted, it all felt perfect for the character. In the beginning of the movie, there's like a couple of scenes, particularly where we're following her around, that really feel like a video game, and she feels like a video game character. Like her outfit, the way that she walks, the way that she moves, like she's like the platonic ideal of a revolutionary fighter in a way, you know? I think her costume and hair and makeup were really interesting. There was one thing she did that was so weird, which is like she had no makeup on. Or at least like, you know, looked like no makeup on. And I mean like nothing, like no concealer, no lip liner, clean face, and just one eyelash extension kind of like in the middle of her eye. I did try to recreate it, utter failure, which was really interesting. It's just like such a weird thing that you would have to maintain that is so out of the norm. And it's like a little act of rebellion even in how she grooms herself and how she presents herself. I thought she was fantastic. Chase Infinity, the daughter, I hadn't known her from anything either. I was a little bit skeptical of her performance in the beginning. Like she took me out of it a bit, but I think some of that is attributable to the writing. I'll get more into that. But by the end of the movie, like there were some really intense scenes that she did perfectly, and she completely won me over. So I think the whole cast, I mean, there's so many more. Sean Penn, I haven't even begun to talk about Sean Penn. Sean Penn is our main villain, and I've never been so uncomfortable looking at someone. He looks, in this movie, it looks like it's uncomfortable to exist as him. I have so many questions about his hair and makeup and body, and how much of it was special effects and how much of it was probably him using steroids or like testosterone. But he was absolutely bizarre to look at, didn't even recognize him. And the way that he moved his mouth, the way that he talked, like I feel like everyone was making pretty bold choices, which I have to think is partly casting really talented actors and partly PTA like on set encouraging those choices, encouraging everyone leaning into the bizarre. But yeah, Sean Penn was incredible. If he doesn't get nominated for like supporting actor, I don't know what the world has come to. Something that sets this movie apart from Eddington that I really liked is that it is tackling a lot of like very obvious real world issues we're facing right now. Especially it talks about like immigration and immigration detention centers and how dehumanizing the US is to immigrants. But at the same time, there are elements that seem like they're from a parallel universe, like are not quite real. So instead of like the KKK, there's the Christmas Adventurers Club, which is, you know, a white supremacist secret organization, but it's like different and bizarre and kind of silly in this way. It's almost like if an alien came down to Earth and you had to explain America to an alien, that's what it would sound like, you know? Like, just like, wait, what? Like, what are we talking about? So many things were just ridiculous. Sean Penn's character being named Lockjaw, Colonel Lockjaw. There were just so many little things that like were almost fourth wall breaking. It's not like too on the nose because of that. And because it really focuses on the human characters. It really focuses on those individual humans and their relationships to one another and not to any kind of like flattened demographic generalization. In Eddington, part of my issue was how on the nose a lot of it was, and how like I don't think it said anything new or interesting about the things that it was covering. Whereas in One Battle After Another, it really touched me emotionally. It really made me feel a lot for these characters. And it did spark some new conversations with me and my friends after the movie about what does it mean to support human rights in this country right now. Not that that's the main point of a movie, but you would hope to get that out of a movie if it's going to tackle political issues of the day. Benicio del Toro, shout out our friend from the Phoenician Scheme episode, completely different person in this, completely different character, completely convincing. Love him. I think if you're someone who's interested in movies enough to follow this podcast, you must have already seen it. But if for some reason like something put you off of it and you didn't go see it, like you didn't like Licorice Pizza or you don't like Leo, go see it in theaters and then come back and get into the spoilery section where we're gonna like really dig in, sink our teeth in. That's all for my spoiler-free friends. Come back when you've seen it. This is your spoiler warning. Spoilers start now. Okay? We open up on a shot of Teyana Taylor sort of strutting down a highway in a black top, cargo jeans with, you know, a singular lash extension in the middle of her eyes and a hat. She's near an immigration detention center that looks a whole lot like ones that we see, you know, in real life. Big chain link fences, people kind of like waiting around, milling about without proper shelter or amenities. Waiting in line for who knows what. There's some big kind of like orchestral music right off the bat, like something big is about to happen. And then we see her linking up with kind of like a group of people who are talking about the plan for the night. They're planning to get 200 to 300 people out, breaking people out of the detention center. And who else is in this little circle of people discussing the plan? Leonardo DiCaprio. Leo plays a character called Pat, and Teyana plays a character called Perfidia Beverly Hills. Okay? We'll get into more like why I think that is her name. So Pat and Perfidia seem to be like friendly, but it's unclear exactly what their relationship is within this social group because everyone's kind of like locked in, obviously, on the heist for the night. She has this incredibly like self-assured, confident, strong aura. He's the opposite. He seems nervous. He seems unsure of what to do with himself, but he's like happy to be there. You know, she's a leader and he's just happy to be included and happy to be there. He's like, okay, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what do you want me to do here? And she says, create a show, Pat. Impress me. And she pulls like his balaclava down over his face. Cut to nighttime. These people, the like revolutionaries, they have their guns and they're kind of sneaking up to and approaching this big wall around the detention center. And they, you know, tie up the guards. They infiltrate. Some people are in charge of getting the migrants who are like sleeping in these crowded quarters, basically like waking them up and getting them out as fast as possible. And then other people are in charge of like basically detaining the soldiers. So Perfidia, Teyana, she finds her way to the boss of the operation, essentially, and he's sleeping. So this is Sean Penn looking pretty unrecognizable with the most, I have to say, like horrific comb over puff of white hair, and his body is so like like it looks so, he looks very much on steroids, like where he's just like really like uncomfortably bulky and veiny and like his clothes are too tight. You know what I mean? But she wakes him up. She's like, hello, get up. This is the revolution. We are the French 75. That's what they call themselves. And I am Perfidia Beverly Hills, motherfucker. He's kind of like, what? Like, he's like very unafraid. She's pointing a gun at his head. Okay. And she's clearly not fucking around. And he's like, kind of like not listening to her, kind of laughing. And she does not take kindly to that. She goes, oh, you think this is funny? You want to play games? Okay, then. And she basically, like, how do I say this in a way that is not going to get taken down? She implies, while intimidating him at gunpoint, that he needs to get it up. And so he's kind of like scared, but he does it. And she's just like holding him at gunpoint, watching him. And then once he's excited, she takes his hat and his gun, makes him stand up and like walk out and leave the detention center, and kind of just like dumps him out there. This was like, took a weird turn that I wasn't expecting her to do that. But I think it introduces like a theme that we see throughout the movie, which is the way that like sex is power, and how for Perfidia, her sexuality is her power in a lot of ways. But sex and sexuality is also a way that men, and especially like white men, it's something that they use to validate their own power, and that they use to intimidate and belittle other people. So in this moment, she very much has the upper hand, and she completely like humiliates him. And a humiliated man is a scary thing because they retaliate. Meanwhile, the rest of the team has gotten a ton of the migrants out and like into the truck to take them away. Leo set off a bunch of pyrotechnics around the camp as like a distraction. He just set off like all these different like flares and basically fireworks around the facility. So that's his thing. He's the pyrotechnics guy. Okay. They call him Ghetto Pat. Perfidia is in the car with like a couple of other people, and she's like, come on, Pat, like we gotta go. Like we need to get out of here now because the alarms are playing, everything. And Pat has this like little outburst that he does where he's like, yeah, viva la revolution. One of the funniest things that Leo does in this movie is these occasional just like compulsive outbursts of excitement about the revolution, where he's mostly kind of like an awkward and like quiet guy, but then he'll get like really hyped up in the moment when they're doing something, or like really inspired by someone else, and he keeps like shouting things and like shouting slogans, and they're like, we need to leave, get in the car. So he gets in the car finally, and they're driving away, and everyone's like hooting and hollering and like celebrating the victory. And Perfidia is like teasing Pat. She's like, you think he likes black girls? Like, do you think he likes me? And they're like making out. So at this point, I'm kind of confused if they were already hooking up or like already an item, or if this is actually the instigating moment, because it seemed pretty familiar. Like it seemed like they were pretty comfortable with each other, but you also, I don't know, they are both kind of weird and just had this like thrilling experience. So in the moment, in the heat of the moment, I don't know. All right, so that's our opening scene. It was pretty intense. This whole scene was really cool to me. This is where I said Perfidia Beverly Hills, Teyana Taylor, reminded me of a video game character. The black crop top, the cargo pants, the gun, the hat, and then the way that the camera was like following her from a POV from behind sometimes while she was walking with the gun. It was very much like the POV you have when you're controlling a video game character in like a first person shooter, if you're not doing like the POV, you know what I mean? Cut to like another moment where it seems like they're doing another job, basically, and she's in like different cargo pants and a crop top, or like jeans and a crop top, but still like has this like insane hourglass body that the camera is like weirdly following. And then you see Pat grab her ass, and then we cut to Colonel Lockjaw, the one that Perfidia like sexually humiliated at the first raid. We cut to him looking through binoculars in a car. So the like camera we were seeing was actually his POV from these binoculars, and he like pulls them down and looks like pissed off when he sees that she's with Pat. So kind of unsurprisingly, but still very hauntingly, he seems to have been like stalking her. Like he has this weird sexual fixation on her. I think they were planting bombs in, I think it was like a big courthouse or a government building where they were gonna like plant explosives to set off after hours as a statement, because their like political demands weren't met, whatever. And so Pat, as the kind of like technical guy, is like explaining to her what to do, and then they like make out. So they're like kind of together at this point. And then on the day when they're supposed to do that is when Colonel Lockjaw is watching them, but they don't know. So she and one of the other revolutionaries, who is a Heim sister, I forget which one, I'm sorry, but I think it's the same one that was in Licorice Pizza. They're both going in looking like dressed professionally as like people who work in the building, going in to plant the devices in different bathrooms. While she's in the bathroom, standing on a like toilet seat, planting something, and like the parallel thing is happening with the Heim sister supposedly in a different bathroom. She's like almost done, and then suddenly the stall door slams open behind her, and we see Colonel Lockjaw walk into the frame. And she's in such a vulnerable position, like she's facing the wall right now, so she can't see who's just come in. And she had no idea that someone was following her. So she's like super caught off guard. And she just like kind of slowly turns around to see that it's him there. She says like, "What do you want?" He says, "You can do whatever you want. I don't care. Blow up whatever you want. But if you care about your cause, you care about your friends, and you want to remain free or whatever, like from the law, you will meet me at this hotel room." And then she kind of like slithers out past him. The revolution and the French 75 is the most important thing in the world to her. So we cut to like a hotel room, and his gun and hat are on a table because he said he was like, "I want my gun and my hat back." He meets her there at the hotel room. It's just this weird sexual interaction. So she is holding the gun the whole time that we see them, pointing the gun at him. So in a sense, you think that like she is protected and like in control in the moment, but in reality that's only serving his desire and gratification, because he's turned on by her being powerful. He's turned on by it, but he also hates her for it and hates himself for liking that about her. And so you see her like straddle him on the bed, but she's fully clothed. He's taken his clothes off and she's holding the gun to him. So it's unclear like what happens sexually. And then it cuts to like whatever, a few minutes later, and she throws him against the wall with the gun. Again, he's like naked and she's clothed, and then leaves. And like maybe sticks the gun up him. Hard to tell. That was out of frame, obviously. So the impression I get from that scene, like in the moment, you're kind of like, okay, I don't know what happened. Obviously, she was coerced. Like, it's not consensual. It was coerced consent. But she betrays no sense of like fear or discomfort, because that's what she can control, is like her reaction to the situation. So then it plays out almost like she's the dominatrix, or that she's in control, when really she's doing it because she has to, not because she wants to. And really the only time you see a reaction out of her is like as she leaves, when he can no longer see her face. You can see her expression, and her like facial expression work was so good, because I find it really hard for to make my face convey what I mean it to convey. And I have like the most respect for actors who can do all these like micro expressions and express something with their eyes. But she does that as she's walking out. There's kind of like a close-up, and you see her look like disturbed and violated, but she doesn't let him see that. Right after she leaves the hotel room, we hear a machine gun. Sorry, I've been told in my comments, machine guns keep coming up in all the movies I'm talking about, but I've been told that it's actually like an automatic gun, not a machine gun. A machine gun has to be mounted. An automatic gun is handheld. Guys, I don't know. Guns are none of my business. But it's like an AK-47. Okay, I think I know that one from like Call of Duty. And it's her, Perfidia, in like a field with the gun, like the ricochet of the gun bumping against a huge baby bump, firing this really loud gun with it bumping against her pregnant belly. It was really quite an image. It was a really cool image, I thought. It says 1,000 words about her as a person, and about how she's experiencing pregnancy and thinking about her upcoming motherhood. She is not a quote unquote naturally maternal woman. You know, she's not someone who has been taught or who has been aspiring to be a caretaker of others. She's a leader, she's a revolutionary, she cares about liberating people, and she cares about fighting for justice, but she doesn't naturally take on a nurturing role in her life with other people. That's hard when you get pregnant, because people do expect mothers to be naturally nurturing and maternal and soft and caring, when not all women feel that way. She's talking and thinking all the time about like what's wrong with the world, how people are being mistreated, and like all of the injustice in the world. So then to bring a child into that is like pretty stressful, because you know very well and you think often about the world that your child is inheriting, that you have not been able to like fix magically. And so the machine gun over the bump represents, I think, both her fear for the child and desire to protect it in the way that she knows how, which is with resistance and violence. Also, I think her need to protect herself from the flattening identity of motherhood that society imposes on women a lot of the time. She needs to maintain her sense of who she is as a woman, as a revolutionary, as someone who does not conform to expectations of her. So yeah, it's a powerful image. It like definitely took me aback and had its shock value, and it had a little bit of humor to it and irony. But ultimately, when you think about it, I think it's very sad. And I think a lot of mothers, or like a lot of soon-to-be mothers, probably relate to that feeling. And I think especially as a Black woman, she knows her child is going to face the same discrimination and abuse that she's faced in the world. And that's like a daunting idea. While she's doing that, they're like all hanging out. Like the core group of the French 75 are kind of hanging out at like a campfire, bonfire. And Pat is looking on a bit nervously, and he turns to his friend who's also in the group and says, like, it's as if she doesn't even know that she's pregnant. He is maybe starting to resent her already for not being the maternal partner that he had in mind or whatever. Sorry, my camera overheated and I took kind of a long break, but I'm back. Even before she has the baby, they are already maybe like growing apart in terms of their views on parenthood. And there's even a conversation that Pat has with Perfidia's mom, so his like kind of mother-in-law, even though they're not married, where she says like, Perfidia is a runner, you are a stone. I think those are the words she uses. Like, what are you going to do about this baby? Basically saying like, I know my daughter and she's not going to do well with being tied down. You need to be prepared as a parent to like parent alone, which is kind of a wild thing to say about your kid, but she is not saying it with any kind of judgment. She's just like stating it neutrally. So she has the baby, and we see Pat and Perfidia laying in bed facing each other with this really cute tiny little newborn baby in between them, and they seem like pretty happy. But then we cut through like a couple of arguments they're having around the house, and it sounds to me like textbook postpartum depression, normal relationship problems that come up from having a baby, where she feels like the baby is replacing her. She feels like Pat doesn't even care about her anymore. He's not attracted to her anymore, because sex was such a huge part of their relationship, and her sexuality is so important to her and her self-worth. And obviously, like, having just had a baby, your body is like, her body has betrayed her, essentially. And he is not emotionally equipped to handle this at all. Like, he is very focused on the baby. He adores the baby. They named her Charlene. And he doesn't understand at all why Perfidia is reacting this way. And she's like, you're trying to tie me down. You're trying to tame me. You can't tell me what to do. At the end of the day, like, I am a revolutionary and I'm going to keep doing my thing. And he's at home with the baby like, okay, go then. Go do your thing. And so she's really coming off very self-centered. But the thing is that, like, I think depression, postpartum depression, is self-centered. Like, mental illness is about yourself. It is happening in your own brain. And there's also the element of, like, I perceive it that way, and we perceive it that way because we're taught that being a mother is supposed to be this transformative experience where suddenly you are a totally selfless caregiver. And that's just not the reality. You don't naturally become that necessarily when you have a baby. So she's not transitioning well. So Pat seems to be primarily doing the parenting. He goes to like Costco or something and he's buying a bunch of diapers and he's waiting in line. And suddenly behind him, we see Colonel Lockjaw come up behind him in the store in public. There's something that Sean Penn kept doing with his mouth that was so weird where like, I can't do it, but he was always like kind of like puckering and pouting his lips before talking. It comes off like a really weird nervous tick. And he just comes up behind Pat and he's like, you got a kid? And Pat's like, yeah, like he doesn't really turn around to look at him. Lockjaw is like, what's her name? He goes, Charlene. Then Lockjaw goes, that sounds like a black girl name. Which I'm like, does it? I don't know if that's true. But obviously he knows that the child is with Perfidia, which is like obviously such a weird thing to say. So then Pat is kind of like, yeah, okay. Lockjaw goes, do you like black girls? I like black girls. Love them. So fucking weird. Like he's definitely, you realize that he's like 100% still stalking Perfidia and stalking them as a couple, obsessed with their baby too. Pat doesn't realize who he is, but he is like freaked out. So then we have another French 75 like mission that Perfidia is taking part in or like leading while presumably Pat is at home with the baby Charlene. And this is a bank robbery. I think basically they just needed cash to fund the revolutionary activities. One of the revolutionaries named Jungle Pussy is strutting up and down like the desks and kind of like, all right, we don't want to hurt anyone, just give us your money. And the vibe is like sort of playful, like, oh, we're just like casually gonna rob this bank and we're gonna go, we're not gonna hurt anyone. Then a gunshot rings out and you see that Perfidia has shot, like non-fatally shot, a police officer who's on his stomach on the ground but keeps moving and like trying to grab his gun. And Perfidia keeps saying like, stop moving, like come on man, stop moving. He like fully reaches toward his hip, like very clearly toward his gun, and she shoots him and like I think kills him, or presumably kills him. Sirens are coming, or someone called the police, and so they have to go run. So they all run, they get into the van, they're driving away, and we get this big car chase scene. Now, this is not the car chase scene that everyone is talking about when they talk about this movie, but I did think it was a really good one, and I think it's almost executed perfectly in the classic car chase way as a setup to foil the really cool car chase at the end of the movie. Even so, like this was a really good one. It looked so DC, like the city looked so like DC to me, but I think it was meant to be LA. Anyway, they like speed through an intersection and actually get hit. They get T-boned by another car, which was kind of a jump scare, but also I was like, in the moment, I was so satisfied by that because in the movies all the time when they fly through intersections, no one ever gets hit. And we keep kind of cutting back and forth from POV inside the car, kind of a wide shot, bird's eye view. And then at some point, Perfidia has to run away on foot and she is clearly surrounded by cars and she just keeps running. Like she never gives up basically until they actually have caught her. And at that point, we cut to a bird's eye view and we see her surrounded and arrested. But yeah, that whole chase felt kind of like GTA vibes, again, video game vibes. I guess she was slammed pretty hard on the ground when they arrested her because then we see her like handcuffed in a hospital bed, like on a gurney in a hospital. Colonel Lockjaw is there sitting next to her in the hospital room. And this is immediately such an unsettling feeling because this is the first time that she's really like physically vulnerable to him. Obviously, he has already coerced her into doing things sexually, but she's physically restrained and tied down in the hospital, clearly like just woke up. So he is playing this part of like, I really want to help you, sweetie, like help me help you. You're gonna have to name names, he says. So he's like, no one's going to do you any favors, especially because you're a black girl. He's obsessed with the fact that she's black and he's obsessed with bringing it up. And he always says girl, not woman, which is just like a subtle kind of disrespect, I feel. You need me, a powerful white man, to help you. And he revels in that. He loves that he has that over her, which is just so obviously like sick and twisted. And I'm really impressed both with PTA's writing and with Sean Penn's acting, the way that they can like portray this pretty complicated social and emotional dynamic that is actually very common, like very commonly the psychology behind racism is this deep like self-loathing and all of the things that Colonel Lockjaw feels about himself or thinks about himself, and how he like projects that onto her because he just wants to feel powerful in any way. I think that's a really important like interpersonal dynamic of racism to examine. Like we talk about systemic racism. He's referencing systemic racism when he says like you're not going to be given a fair trial, but he is a good embodiment of this more like intensely personal racism and like the psychology of radicalized white supremacists. And somehow in all of that and in how disturbing it is, there are moments of humor too. So I mean, it's just so complex and layered, and I was very captivated by it. But anyway, he says you're going to have to name names and then I can protect you. And so she says like I want you to help me, or I want you to protect me. He then like leans over her and he goes, because you love me? Ugh, shivers down my spine. It's the same as how he coerced her to meeting him in the hotel room. Like he knows it's coercion and he knows he's forcing something out of her, but he doesn't care because he wants it so badly for his ego anyway that he's happy to pretend it's given willingly. And that is a very scary quality to have. We cut to Charlene at home crying, and the mother-in-law is there, and other people in the French 75 are there. Their one like main friend that we've seen them with, and Pat is like preparing to take Charlene and run, basically. I guess they just knew that Perfidia had been captured, and that is enough for everyone to know that they're in danger and that they need to scram just in case she does give any information up. Pat is talking to this guy on the couch, like one of the French 75, who is explaining the new identities he's giving them. So he's giving them like fake passports and paperwork to take on a new identity and flee. And you're going to go to this town first and wait a couple days, and then you're going to go to this town. He also gives them these two sensors, they're called. They kind of look like a Wii controller, but silver. And he explains that they both emit a melody when they're in range of each other, like 100 meters in range of each other. He's giving them to as many people as he can so that in the future, if you ever run into someone with that sensor, you know that you can trust them. And the melody he plays, it's this really interesting kind of like electronic, mysterious, synthy sound that blends really well into the score and the soundtrack of the movie. And when we hear it later on as well, like there are moments when I didn't even realize that it was coming from the sensor because it is so incorporated and blended into the score, which I thought was really cool. There's this other woman from the French 75 that seems to have been like Pat's best friend in the French 75, as opposed to like Jungle Pussy was Perfidia's best friend. But this woman who's helping them flee is Deandra, and she was kind of the one that he was exchanging knowing looks with when Perfidia was being kind of reckless with the pregnancy. So they say bye, they say I love you, like in a platonic way. It's just Pat and Charlene in the car now. Cutting back and forth, then we see that Perfidia is being placed in the witness protection program, and they move her into this like very sterile millennial grayish new build house, like a suburban house. And it's really nice and like fancy in a way, but it's also just so soulless. And she walks through to the backyard, and it's this little, small yard, and then this huge concrete wall in the back that like covers up the view of what would be like the nice view of the hills. And it just is very obviously as bad as a maximum security prison as far as Perfidia is concerned, is this literal physical confinement to being in the home, being in a house, and fulfilling, even in like a Sims way, the role of a woman in a house in the suburbs. She is completely trapped and isolated by that. It's a nightmare. And then we start seeing like what's happening to all the other members of the French 75 who presumably she would have given up. So we have the Haim sister, and she's wearing this like fuck-ass black bob wig, kind of like in a grocery store, and she sees a suspicious looking guy walk in and like tries to get out, and she runs out this like back entrance, and you're seeing like a wide shot of her leaving through the door. The second she walks through the door, she gets shot in the head and falls over. And like the whole audience gasped. It was very sudden. So basically like the feds are on them. They had the place surrounded for just this one person, Everyone's getting rounded up and arrested, shot, what have you. Meanwhile, Colonel Lockjaw gets a Medal of Honor, of course, and he's feeling really pleased with himself. He has a spring in his very awkward, stiff step, and he brings flowers to the house where Perfidia is supposed to be in the witness protection program. And he walks out of the car in this like ill-fitting suit with the bouquet of flowers, and he knocks on the door and she doesn't answer, and then he knocks harder, like aggressively, and then she still doesn't answer, and so he very quickly like turns around and walks back toward the car. And I knew that he was not just like giving up and leaving, but he pulls out like a battering ram, like a heavy cylinder with a handle that police use to bust down doors, and he walks right back up to the door and kicks the door in with it. I thought this was a really fun sequence. It's like a whole like 30 seconds, no dialogue, just him trying to knock on the door with the flowers and then go back to the car, get the thing, and then bust the door open. And I think it shows his whole MO with her of how like he really wants to maintain this little play act of them being in love. Like he wants to just knock on the door with flowers. The reality is she's trapped in that house because he forced her to be there, because he took away everybody else in her life and ruined her life. And now he wants to be the hero. But the second that she doesn't comply, and the second she doesn't give him what he wants exactly when he wants it, he turns violent again. He gets in the house and it's empty. She's not there. And then taped to the back window is a piece of paper that looks like it was like the top of a witness protection program document that she signed. But she's written on it, "This pussy don't pop for you," and taped it up for him. Not only am I gonna escape this house you've put me in and go live my life freely, I also want you to know that I never was actually attracted to you, and fuck you. We get like a quick shot of her walking towards what looks like the Mexico border, the US-Mexico border, on foot, and it seems like implied that she gets through. And as she leaves, we cut back to Pat and Charlene, the baby, in the car driving away, and he just looks scared, and she is the cutest fucking baby I've ever seen in my life. The longest lashes, so cute. But that's it, and then it cuts to 16 years later. So that whole, everything I've said so far about the plot is kind of backstory for the next plot that is going to take place over the rest of the movie. And I didn't mind that because it was almost like a good, like I said, I liked the pacing. It was a good way of breaking things up. I almost like took a deep breath. I was like, okay. Pat and Charlene are now living as Bob and Willa Ferguson. Those are the fake identities. So we meet Willa, played by Chase Infinity, doing like martial arts at a dojo, and she has a purple belt, which makes perfect sense, right? Because Bob, Pat, Leo, obviously would want her to know how to protect herself, but also doing martial arts at a dojo and having a purple belt is like a perfectly normal teenage activity or sport to do. It's good for college applications, you know, like it's a very normal suburban thing. So then we see Pat in the high school parking lot in his car, looking pretty disheveled and unshaven. And he is like hotboxing the car in the high school parking lot before he goes inside. Yeah, so he's kind of a stoner. He goes in for presumably like a normal parent-teacher conference, and he must be like reeking of weed, and his eyes are so red. Like it cuts to him sitting in one of those little desks. He's looking at her and his eyes are like shot. And it's just this very normal white lady history teacher. Bob is like not really paying attention. He's kind of looking around at the portraits on the wall, and he's going, "I hope you're teaching the right kind of history. I see a lot of pictures up here, all the greats." And he keeps just like very casually bringing up that all of these men, like the founding fathers or whatever that you teach in American history, all own slaves, and there's fucking slave owners everywhere. He's not wrong, but I think this is making a point to show that he still has his like leftist revolutionary beliefs and that he really did believe in them. And that he's having a hard time with Willa existing in like the normal world and public school where you're taught American history, you know, from a certain perspective. It's also just funny. And so she's just kind of like pushing past it and just being like, okay, well, Willa's like a really great student. And then all of a sudden, Bob starts crying, like he gets emotional and puts his head in his hands. He's a wreck. Like he's really not keeping it together. And the woman, the teacher's like really caught off guard. She's like, "Oh my God, like, are you okay?" He says, "Sorry, like this is very emotional for me. Willa's mom died when she was little. Willa doesn't know her mom." This whole scene was kind of like a skit. Like it was funny and lighthearted, but I think it also was like genuinely sad to see that Bob is like trying to be a parent, but he is struggling. And you also, even at this point, like you are kind of curious about who he is as a person, because for the whole first part of the movie, like 16 years ago, Perfidia's presence is so interesting. She really is the main character, and Bob is just like also there. But now that it's Bob and Willa, or Pat and Charlene alone, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, wait, who is he? And he doesn't really know either. Then we see another detention center, not very different from 16 years ago. It looks pretty much the same, actually. And Colonel Lockjaw is in charge again. He's like called to some important meeting and told there's a car waiting for him. He seems excited about it, and he is being ushered through this like back door of a hotel. There's like kind of romantic music playing, like strings, and we walk into this huge, very fancy, everything is white and cream colored and like softly lit, and there's these two guys there. Colonel Lockjaw seems like really nervous and eager to please, and they're kind of like, you know, sorry about all that where we brought you in the back, but my daughter's getting married. It's black tie. We didn't want you to feel out of place. So that's already kind of passive aggressive. And then I also was kind of like, what's the deal with my daughter's getting married? Like, why did we have that? Other than it felt like a reference to The Godfather. Marlon Brando is like, I'm not going to do the impression, but you come to me on my daughter's wedding day. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but whatever. And so they're kind of talking in coded language about, you know, maybe inviting Colonel Lockjaw into their special club. One of them goes, if you want to save the planet, of course you have to start with immigration. And Lockjaw is like, oh yeah, totally, sir. And then the guy's like, you said that. That was a quote from you. And he's like, oh, like he's just such a bumbling idiot. And the other guy is like, basically we want to fight the enemies who are dangerous lunatics, haters, and punk trash. Jim Kringle passed away, so there's an opening in the Christmas Adventurers Club, which, if you are a member of, you will, of course, be superior to other human beings. And we don't tolerate anyone who is soft in their duty to racial purification. So it goes from kind of like coded language to, you know, saying the quiet part out loud, which I think is true of extremist spaces. But also I thought this is a good example of how I feel like PTA is bending reality a little bit, and it's a mirror to society, but it's also a warped mirror that kind of shows you it in a new light. Like, it's not that different from how the president of the United States speaks in terms of dangerous lunatics, haters, and punk trash. Basically, they know that Colonel Lockjaw is obsessed with them and really wants in, and so they start questioning him to see if he might be a good fit. Have you ever engaged in an interracial relationship is one of the questions, and he's like, no, sir. And they're like, okay, cool. Do you submit yourself to a background check? And he says, yes, I submit myself. And the language there too, of course, is like coded. Like, there's a double meaning to submission. Like, he is submissive to these men whose approval he's so desperate to get. We get these like big symphonic chords in the score, like something really important has just happened, and Colonel Lockjaw is walking out with tears in his eyes. Colonel Lockjaw is deeply insecure and like motivated above all else by the need for external validation, especially from people who he perceives to be superior, which is like rich and powerful white men, as the bastion, the gold standard of what he wants to become to like fulfill his destiny as a man. And then you see how insidious that obsession can be and how it like drives him to do anything for their approval. Like I said, PTA is not just pointing at things and saying there's white supremacists. He's exploring the intense psychological and interpersonal dynamics behind things like that. And I think Sean Penn plays Lockjaw perfectly because he's so weird socially and awkward that it makes sense why he would be desperate for inclusion. You know, remember the guy who did the fake IDs for everyone when they were fleeing? His name is Howard Summerville. We fade into him at like a cheap diner somewhere. Presumably he never was captured. We cut to him hosting a radio show, talking about the capitalist overlords, whatever else, like still talking about the same leftist ideology that the French 75 believed in. And while he's just doing his normal broadcast, living this like normal routine that he's been living, a black hood is put over his head and he's snatched. He gets kidnapped right out of his house and dragged into a car across the street by this big dude with all these tattoos, wearing like unmarked military fatigues, like vaguely camo military fatigues, but no official badge or association or anything. And there's these little kids on the curb watching him. Yeah, I found it very notable that this guy was wearing kind of like army clothing but with no badge or anything, because we keep seeing ICE agents arresting people in plain clothes with no identification, no badge. And it's very scary, because if you're just supposed to submit to arrest by anyone who comes into your home, how do you know that that's an agent of the United States government versus like a human trafficker? And how much of a difference really is there in all these situations? I don't know. So these kids are watching, and they, as soon as the car pulls away, they run inside and they broadcast on that same radio, like, all other safe houses, implement plan, snap, crackle, pop. Is it safe houses or sanctuary cities? I'm not sure. But basically, like, they had a backup plan. Like, Howard Summerville had told them, like, hey, if anything ever happens to me, you need to get on the radio and do this thing. He gets taken to this, like, maximum security facility, and he's brought into a tent to be interrogated by Colonel Danvers. He's more normal looking and like better looking than Colonel Lockjaw. Apparently this guy's not even really a professional actor. He is like a military veteran. I don't know. He was pretty good actor to me. He's interrogating this guy about where Charlene and Pat are. All these 16 years later, since they escaped and used a different name, now this guy wants to know where they are. And Howard is kind of trolling them. He's like, okay, I'll tell you. Their names are Fred Flintstone and Arthur Fonzarelli. And Agent Danvers is like, very cool, you're joking. I wonder if your sister would find it funny. So he kind of implicitly threatens his sister with what? I don't know. You know, like maybe she was also involved in the revolutionary stuff and she could be arrested if they pursued it, I assume. But that scares him, and cut to a shaky handheld camera following Agent Danvers outside to report to who else but Colonel Lockjaw that their names now are Bob and Willa Ferguson, and they're in, I forget the name of the town, California. I loved this shaky camera moment because I was so nervous. And it did kind of feel like we're going back to the action again. And in that whole first sequence before the flash forward in time, before the time jump, we had a lot of handheld shaky cam for the revolutionary activities. But since then, it's been fairly steady. And now when like Colonel Lockjaw is about to find out where they are and what their names are, we're back to that very unsteady, unsettled feeling. We see these army guys are planning their capture of Bob and Willa, and they're talking about them like in this very dehumanizing way, like talking about them like animals. And they're saying that they're in a sanctuary city full of wet and stinkies. And Colonel Lockjaw is kind of like, okay, we need a reason to go to this city. Like we need a legitimate reason for us to be there. So let's say we need to do a routine drug bust. They said that this Chicken Licken factory was also a heroin distribution center, but they essentially fabricate this idea as a background for them to infiltrate the city. Meanwhile, they're just going there for Bob and Willa, really. I wrote down that there was sad, dissonant guitar here. It's evocative. Leo is just at the kitchen table in their little, it's kind of like a kitschy, artsy little house. And he looks tired / high. Willa walks in and gives him coffee. And she's kind of playing the role of like the parentified eldest daughter. Very obviously, she's like, where were you last night? This is where I was saying I didn't necessarily love her acting because I don't know, something about it felt a little bit Disney Channel, but it also could have just been the writing. She's questioning where he was last night. Like, was he drinking? And then she's like, well, how'd you get home? And he goes, honey, I know how to drive drunk, okay? The point is that we get this dynamic of him being kind of a stoner bum. And he's there for her in the sense of like he's physically there, but it doesn't seem like he's really taking care of her emotionally or mentally. Like he's not present and he's not doing everything that parents should do for a 16-year-old because she should not be taking care of him. I think a lot of people struggle to understand this, and when they see this kind of dynamic with a father and daughter, they're like, oh, it's so cute, you know? It's not cute. It's not cute just because she's a girl and he's a man. I don't find it cute when daughters take care of their parents when they're still children themselves. Obviously, as like a 16-year-old, you can have like a good relationship with your parent where you have empathy for them and see them as a human being and everything, but you should not be the head of the household or the caretaker, you know? It's too much responsibility. She should still be a kid. But on the other hand, like the reason she's so worried about these irresponsible behaviors of him is because she's such a square and she's so sheltered in a way from the world that he knew. It's a double-edged sword. Like he has protected her and sheltered her in a way from the life of violence and fear that he had before her with perfidia. But on the other hand, you know, just the absence of danger is not the same as providing all of the love and attention and care that a child needs. She also calls him Bob instead of Dad, which I know some people do that just as like a playful thing, but it does feel in this case like maybe she doesn't respect him as a dad. He's more like an equal to her. And this is where I started to notice we get a lot of these shots in profile with like a silhouette, often Bob's silhouette against some backlight. So he's sitting at the kitchen table. We're looking at his profile facing towards the left of the screen and he's kind of backlit. Not to like over analyze it, but because we do get a lot more of these shots, I think it's just him not knowing who he is. Like your silhouette, your profile is like a simplified cutout or shorthand of your identity, and he is battling with his. He's also paranoid as fuck. Her friends pull up in a car outside, like on the gravel, and he's so paranoid. He's like, who are those people? Who are them? Those are your friends? Those are your little friends? But they're just driving a red car around like that? And she's like, yeah, Dad, or Bob. Leo's like, who's this fucking freak at the door? He really had me giggling. And he's arguing with her before they answer the door. He's arguing with her that she needs to take the sensor with her, basically. The ones that Howard Summerville had made them. She like doesn't want to take it. It's gonna cramp her style. She's wearing this like long tutu with like Doc Martens, a white t-shirt and a leather jacket, and her natural curly hair and a ponytail. Adorable. Something I would totally wear as a teenager. Very cute. So finally she just like wants to appease him. She goes and gets like a bag and puts it in the bag, and they open the door to the friend, and he's like threatening her friend, who's just kind of like, hey, I'm just here to pick up Willa. This scene was great. This was really fun. Whole theater was giggling. Leo was being so funny, like in his like erratic behavior and his like outbursts, and the way that teenagers are so unfazed or unmoved is so funny. Like I remember being on both sides of this. I remember being a teenager and having adults like crashing out, like coaches freaking out because you forgot your jersey or something, and us just looking at each other and kind of laughing. And then I also remember being an adult trying to like tutor teenagers or something and trying to like move them into understanding that something is important. Like, you have a test tomorrow, you have a C average, I'm trying to help you, and them just kind of being like, yeah, I guess. And you can also see how this behavior of his would really drive a wedge between himself and Willa, because he is acting crazy. Like, he's acting really, really paranoid, and we get why he's paranoid. He has good reason to be paranoid, but he's not managing it well. She has no understanding of why that is, and it results in him being really preoccupied with, to her, imaginary threats rather than with actually connecting with her. So she's like, you know, no one's coming to get you, Bob. And then she leaves with her friends. What I was not prepared for is to hear Mo Bamba at the high school gym. Defo some flashbacks to college there. You know, it still gets the people going, but it's just like a typical high school dance. There's like some half-assed lights and kind of a dance floor in the middle of the gym, and Willa is sitting on the bleachers with some of her friends, very much in the shadows. Like, it's very dark in the bleachers, and she's just sitting kind of looking on, a little bit nervous. She embodies this kind of shy, sweet, risk-averse, watching from the sidelines girl. And again, this really cute outfit, the white t-shirt, leather jacket, tulle skirt, biker boots. She's full of these contradictions. Like, she has this toughness to her, but underneath it, she's just wearing like a t-shirt and a fluffy skirt. Like, she's just a girl. She actually is just a girl. I hate when like 25-year-old women say I'm just a girl. Sorry. I can get into more of why I think that's not feminist, but Willa is just a girl. She's 16. She goes to the bathroom, and there's like all these teenage girls like giggling and talking in there, and I thought they were really cute and really well done. Like, they are teenage girls. They were all kind of like awkward looking in weird clothes and makeup. I think it shows that PTA knows teenagers, especially girls. These were all girls, and thinks they're cool. and interesting and funny. There was just a loving touch in this movie. So Willa's alone in there when they leave, and she's like going to wash her hands, and the sensor starts beeping. We start to hear that melody from the sensors. The first watch in theaters, I didn't even realize that it was beeping because it blended in with the soundtrack so well, and it was kind of a subtle, like mysterious electronic tune. And Willa kind of like realizes and looks down and freaks out. Someone says, "Baby, don't be scared." So she turns, and we're now in this shot that we're frozen in for the next like minute or so. That's really cool, where Willa is standing with her back against the mirror in the bathroom, like a full-length mirror. So we see the reflection of like the back of her outfit a little bit, and then we see her looking towards the door, and out of focus we see a woman facing her, like with her hands up, like, "Don't be scared." This is where Chase Infinity's acting for me really kicked in, but she looks scared shitless, like she's frozen. She did not really believe that this thing was even real. Fair enough. So the woman comes into focus, and it is Deandra, the one who was friends with Pat and Perfidia and was there helping Pat escape with Charlene. And she says to her this code, Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, Hooterville Junction. This comes up a lot throughout the movie, so I'm going to like explain it a little bit. That's a direct reference to The Revolution Will Not Be Televised by Gil Scott Heron, 1971. Once I like played the song, I realized I had heard it, and it's the code that the ex-French 75 used to identify who to trust. First person, Deandra says, Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction. Willa says, will no longer be so goddamn relevant. Deandra says, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow. Willa says, because black people will be in the street. Deandra says, looking for a brighter day. And then together they say, the revolution will not be televised. And Willa goes, my dad said if anyone said that I should trust them with my life. So they run out of the gym into the parking lot and run into like a van and drive away just in time, like just as the police lights are showing up and the military guys burst into the dance. The way that they bust into is so over the top. It's a high school fucking dance. So we're thinking, all right, the French 75 or whatever like network is left rescued Willa. So does Bob know what's going on now? Cut to Bob chilling on the couch at home, drinking beer, smoking a joint, watching the Battle of Algiers. If you are not familiar, that's a very, very famous movie, very important movie in film history. It came out in 1966. Film has always been political and will always be political. It has always been a tool of direct propaganda and more subtle propaganda, soft power, cultural power, whatever. So the Battle of Algiers showed how incredibly bloody the fight between the French and the native Algerians was. When Algeria tried to gain independence, it turned into quite a violent, very, very bloody war. And a lot of people would not know that. They wouldn't know the extent of the violence and the oppression of the French. Nowadays, we're seeing atrocities live streamed on Instagram, and some people still don't think it's real. But this movie in 1966 was kind of a version of that, of exposing the atrocities to the world. So it's very important in film history and in like political history. It almost feels like he was preempting the criticism of like, oh, every movie now is political, everything now is woke and diversity higher, blah, 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 blah. I feel like PTA is preemptively saying like, no, fuck you. Film has always been political, and I'm not just like ticking a box in 2025. Not that he's saying like my movie is going to be as important as the Battle of Algiers. It's also like drawing a parallel to the quote unquote war being fought or like starting now between Colonel Lockjaw and his men and the people of their city, the normal people of their city, and specifically Bob and Willa. Because as we're watching this battle on his little TV, we cut back to the gym where all the military guys are at the high school, and they have the kids lined up and they're coming up one by one and being asked the same question, which is, do you know Willa Ferguson? And every time the kid says no, they're like, okay, you can go. Do you know Willa Ferguson? Okay. Do you know Willa Ferguson? Like, it just is such a stupid fucking way to like narrow down to the people who know Willa Ferguson. I don't know, it made me laugh. It's so inefficient and bizarre. Bob at home, he gets a call on the landline, and someone on the other side of the line says, we have trouble ahead and the road is unclear. This like code phrase basically. And he's like, who is this? And the woman on the other end is like, I need the greeting code, Bob. And he's like, oh fuck, I don't remember the fucking greeting code because I got a little bit high and it's been years. The sunrise in the west, right? Like something that's not like quite right, but she knows who he is, so she kind of lets it slide. And she says, the billy goat has been taken. The billy goat is Howard Summerville. Howard Summerville has been taken. She says, yep, yesterday by Stephen Lockjaw. And he's like, oh my God, Lockjaw. Like he hasn't heard that name in years. He's traumatized by this guy who was obsessed with him and his girlfriend and his daughter. And they say Willa has been extracted to a rendezvous point, and then before he can like follow up, she just hangs up, and he's like, wait, what? Where is she? He doesn't remember the rendezvous points. It's been 16 years since he was active in this organization, and he's really high also. So again, here we get him in profile with the window behind him on the phone, and then we cut 180 degrees across to him in profile with the other side of the house behind him, the kitchen, as opposed to like the front window. It's pretty unusual to do this. Like I've talked about the 180 degree rule before in my Sorry Baby episode, but this movie breaks it a couple of times too. It's weird to see an actor in profile on one side and then cut directly to the opposite profile. So it feels pretty unsettling compared to like we've had pretty still shots of him, like wide shots of him on the couch chilling, because he's been rocked now. Like his world has been flipped. There's like two sides to him. There's the loser, bum, depressed, kind of useless dad. And then there's the version of him that was an active, passionate revolutionary who fought in battles, basically. And it's kind of like in this moment, he has to choose who he's going to be. Are you going to rise to the occasion? Are you going to be that guy again? That's what that shot was to me. So he's like talking himself down, not to panic, to get his shit together. Like, okay, don't panic, don't panic. Takes another hit. Cut to the door gets busted in, like a huge SWAT team again comes into the house, but you don't know if he actually is hiding or not, or what the deal is. I love when movies do that. That really doesn't get old for me. There's like some really suspenseful music. I was scared at this point. Lockjaw takes a baby photo of Willa off like the corkboard in the hallway and sniffs it. Fucking disgusting. They find a tunnel under the floorboards, like in the bedroom, and it's been kind of like, it looks like he has pretty recently escaped. And then we cut to inside the tunnel looking up. Colonel Lockjaw and his guys looking down into the tunnel, and it was kind of like a trunk shot, like a Reservoir Dogs-esque trunk shot where you feel vulnerable and small and kind of scared. They throw a gas canister in, like I guess tear gas. Cut to the tunnel behind Bob, like a narrow dirt tunnel he's crawling through, and the gas like catching up to him, and he holds his breath and like closes his eyes and crawls really fast and just barely gets out. He gets out like randomly kind of in the woods in like an outhouse. Bob runs into some like facility, and he runs into the bathroom and washes his eyes from the gas. He's still in his pajamas and his robe. He has like a go bag with him, like that is like old and kind of dusty, that seems like he had it packed for escape for a long time, and attached to it is a mini little light pink backpack that he must have prepared for Willa when she was a kid. He walks out of the bathroom into like a big supermarket, and again we have like a pretty handheld shaky camera. He's on the payphone outside. He calls like, I don't know, the French 75 hotline or whatever, how he knows the number to call, I don't know, but he's trying to find out the rendezvous point where they took Willa. They have this whole like comically long greeting code. The guy on the other side says, "Rise and shine." Bob says, "Bat an eyelash. Good morning." There are no hands on the clock. He's like trying to remember. Why? Because they are not needed. What time is it? Like they're still going. But when they get to what time is it, he's like, fuck, I don't remember that part. Let's not nitpick the codes. My name is Bob Ferguson. I need the rendezvous point. I lost my daughter. But the guy sounds like a fucking asshole. Like he sounds really pedantic. And he's like, what is the time? Like I said, this is PTA acknowledging that there is a lot of like self-important and performative wokeness in leftist spaces, and this guy on the phone who's like insisting on the code is like a caricature of that. Well, maybe you should have studied the revolutionary text more. Call us back when you have the time. Meanwhile, the police, army, whatever, they bust a huge factory, the Chicken Licken factory, which is like their fake heroin distribution bust. But there are actually a lot of undocumented people working there. So they're also trying to arrest them. But also that whole thing is just a cover for why they're in the city in the first place, which is actually to get Bob and Willa. We have this like very stressful, chaotic staccato piano chords going on. Whew. It really keeps your body tense. Like there were parts of this where I just like couldn't even eat my popcorn. I was so locked in. Sensei, Benicio del Toro, Sensei Sergio St. Carlos, is at the dojo, like after hours, it seems like, and he gets a call about the chicken licking bust. He's like, okay, don't worry about it. I got you. Bob shows up at the dojo and he says, I need your help, Sensei. I don't know. I think it's so funny that he's a grown man and he calls this guy Sensei as well, but like everybody does. And then police are like all over the city. So at this point, like things are escalating outside because with the big factory bust and with this like huge presence of basically ICE or the National Guard, whatever, people are out protesting because it's a sanctuary city and most of the people in the city support immigration rights and don't want like all of these people to be arrested. So Bob is like always panicking and insane, and Sensei is the opposite. He's like super calm and super level-headed. So he's just got this call that this huge factory is being raided and that all of these people in the community, it seems like he's kind of a community leader, all of these people are now at risk of being detained. And then at the same time, Bob bursts in his like dirty clothes and backpack and sunglasses and is like, Sensei, I need your help. Bob is trying to charge his phone because he has a burner phone in this go bag that can't be tracked, and he needs that phone to contact the French 75 to get Willa's location. That's why he had used the payphone, but there's like not that many payphones around anymore these days. From here on out, he needs to charge this phone and use it. Again, like it seems like he prepared this go bag a long time ago, like years and years ago, so it makes sense that the phone would be dead. So he's like chaotically trying to plug his phone in, and Sensei is like, well, we gotta go because there's a roundup. And again, we get them like silhouetted against the windows looking at each other, these like two sides of the same coin. We get a very shaky handheld shot in the car in profile, and meanwhile it seems like Agent Danvers and the guys eventually did find Willa's friends by asking all the kids one by one, because now each of her friends that we met earlier picking her up is being sat down one by one in that same like interrogation tent with Agent Danvers and being asked about Willa. He's asking them like, what's her phone number? And they each of them are saying she doesn't have a phone because her dad doesn't let her have a phone. Bob, he's telling Sensei like Willa doesn't have a phone, and Sensei just looks at him, and Benicio del Toro has these great facial expressions. His eyes are always kind of like half lit and he's just naturally like, I don't know. Bob's like, what, she has a phone? Sensei's like, yeah. Everyone knows she has a phone. I don't have her number, but yeah, she has a phone. Like, I guess he's seen her at classes at the dojo with a phone. So now you realize that all of her friends are lying for her to protect her, which is like pretty badass for these teenage kids to be doing. Willa and Deandra are in their own car now, very dimly lit, again, driving far away. We don't know where. Willa tells Deandra that Bob told Willa that Lockjaw killed her mom. And Deandra's kind of like, okay. In the city, like I said, there's a huge protests going on. The riot police come out with the shields and the masks. We see a guy throw a Molotov cocktail towards the line of riot police. Police then fire into the crowd with, I think, rubber bullets and tear gas, and people start screaming and fleeing. So Sensei and Bob are driving, and as they're driving, these guys on skateboards skate up next to the driver door and hold on to the car while speaking to Sensei, and they basically are explaining to him like what's going on, which is pretty badass. So they get to like a corner store, like a bodega type of thing, and Sensei is like, okay guys, the store is closed, get everyone to the church and then to the tunnel. Bob by this point, like while Sensei's talking, has already plugged his phone into a wall, and then Sensei's like, come on Bob, we gotta go, and Bob unplugs it again and runs after him. Sensei takes him upstairs into an apartment where his family is. There's like all these people hanging out, eating, whatever. He goes, Bob, this is everybody, this is Bob, El Gringo Zapata. I should learn Spanish at this point in my life. I have until the Super Bowl to learn Spanish, so I'll work on that pronunciation. But Zapata is referring to the Mexican revolutionary Emiliano Zapata. So he's like basically introducing Bob as like, this is like a revolutionary fighter. And then this whole time, Sensei is speaking to lots of people in Spanish without subtitles, which I immediately smiled at to myself. Like, I loved that there were no subtitles. And then after I saw the movie and I was talking to friends, like so many other people said the exact same thing, that they loved that there were no subtitles for the Spanish, because it's almost like once there are subtitles, it's saying like this is a foreign language. And in LA, Spanish is not really a foreign language at this point. Like, so many people natively speak Spanish in the US, and especially in like the Southwest. It just made it feel so much more natural and like part of the natural texture of the environment for them to be speaking Spanish. I don't know. I feel like subtitles would have taken me out of it. And then also, like, I don't speak Spanish. English is my first language. I studied French in like all of school until college, and then I studied Arabic in college. I'm Lebanese, so my family speaks English, French, and Arabic, right? I don't speak any Spanish, but I consume enough like pop culture and media and have enough friends from different places that like I just have absorbed some Spanish by osmosis, obviously. So I didn't miss anything, I don't think. Like I was listening to him speaking Spanish, and with context clues, you don't really miss anything. I got the gist of what was going on. So it's not like it was intentionally like excluding you if you don't speak Spanish and being like, fuck you, learn Spanish. It was more so just saying like, I'm not translating this for you, because if you exist in this country or in this area right now, then you already walk around and are in situations where people are speaking Spanish, you know? And then I also think like in terms of language and film, English language films are so dominant, like globally, even in non-English speaking countries, because there's such a huge movie making industry in America and Hollywood. And then of course you have like other big hubs of movie making in the world. There's Bollywood. A lot of Arab movies are from Egypt and Lebanon, but it is true that so many people in the world consume English language American media, whereas Americans almost exclusively consume American media because there's so much of it, right? There's something like soft cultural influence that comes with that. Maybe since Parasite was the movie of the year, it was a moment for foreign language films too. It was a moment to be like, okay, like you guys are missing out on so many good movies if you refuse to watch something with subtitles in a language you don't understand. This just feels like a natural evolution of English language films, of American films, to include Spanish and other like really commonly spoken languages in a way that feels integrated and normal, and not like, okay guys, now the Latino people are going to speak Spanish. Here's what they're saying, you know? I just think that PTA like read this dynamic really well, and he was right that you don't need subtitles for this. This scene is really cool. The scene is super fast paced. We're like handheld following them around. The camera's tracking Sensei through this building. There's all these different doors. There's basically like a mini refugee camp, like women and children sleeping on mats in the hallway. It seems like he's helping them escape detention. And he says to Bob, we have a little Latino Harriet Tubman situation going on. It's all from the heart, no cash. Like he makes a point of saying that because there are so many people who take advantage of the vulnerability of people in that position and take money and put people's lives so at risk unnecessarily. Sensei's kind of running the show here. He like is directing people what to do. One woman wakes everyone up and is like, I need you all to form a line with your kids and your things. We gotta go. Inside the apartment again, Bob is sitting on the couch. Very similar shot to him sitting on the couch at home. The couch is his element, and don't I relate, Bob? He's finally charged his phone and he's like, Sensei, my phone's charged. And Sensei's like, okay, like busy dealing with his own shit. So he calls that number again and he gets the same guy. The guy's still like, what time is it? Bob just like breaks into sobs. He's like, listen, they used to call me Rocket Man. They used to call me Ghetto Pat. I was a part of the French 75, the original French 75. I need to know where my daughter is. My daughter was taken away. Bob basically asked to speak to the manager. He says, I'm calling in a Greyhawk 10. I don't know why it took him so long to do this, but I guess he really expected this guy on the phone to be reasonable, and he's not being reasonable. At the end of the day, like a criminal organization, a revolutionary organization, whatever type of illicit organization, you do have to do admin. You got to do like payroll. Sensei's assembling like a rifle out of a violin case or guitar case. All the women and children in the hallway are lined up and they're being guided down into a tunnel. The children are tired and crying and holding on to like stuffed animals. I don't know. It's just such a heartbreaking sight. I think PTA captured pretty perfectly all of these moments of like discomfort, unsettlement, uncertainty, being tired, sleeping on something uncomfortable, having young children with you who are crying and tired and grumpy. That's the reality, and that's traumatizing. As everyone's just starting to get into the tunnel and get away, the military guys are at the front door. And the kid on watch sees them and runs upstairs to warn everyone. Bob finally gets through to the manager of Comrade Josh, basically on the line, and it's his old friend. It's one of the friends from the French 75 that we actually did see escape, like one of the raids where people were getting arrested. He immediately tells him the rendezvous point is the Sisters of the Brave Beaver. So he's frantically getting instructions on how to get there. Sensei is like, Bob, it's time to go. Like, we gotta go. Handheld shaky camera. We've got the skaters in the hallway, and Sensei is like, these guys are gonna take you to a car. It's my car. Take it and go. Bob's kind of freaking out. He's like, no, Sensei, I want to go with you. And Sensei's like, courage, Bob. When he hands him the little musical instrument case, but it's really a gun, he gets all hyped up again like a kid. Thank you, sensei. Willa's friends have all been holding it down with Agent Danvers, saying she has no phone, but Danvers finally starts like threatening them, actually, like, this is stupid. Why are you going to get arrested over this? Like, just tell me. And so finally one of the friend finally breaks, which is understandable. You can't expect your teenage friends to get arrested for you when they don't even know why you would be in any kind of trouble or danger. And it's like the prisoner's dilemma. Like, they had no idea if one of the other friends had snitched, so then they would be in trouble for lying. Not a big deal. My impression was that those are good friends and they held it down as long as could reasonably be expected. But that means that Willa's phone buzzes while she's in the car with Deandra, and Deandra hears it and she's pissed because she had asked Willa, like, before they went, she was like, do you have a phone? And Willa said no. So she gets the phone and throws it out the car window, but it's kind of too late. Lockjaw, of course, was tracing the call and they know they're driving south on this road, so they're off to follow them. Bob is jumping roof to roof with the skaters. They're like going across roofs to get to the car that he's supposed to get to because the place is obviously surrounded. Oh, this was cool. This was visually one of the best scenes in the movie because it's like late sunset, dusk, and so we get all these really cool shots of the three or four younger guys jumping from roof to roof in these like super elegant kind of like poses, you know, like they seem so nimble and light and young and agile, almost like they're floating or flying through the air. And then right behind them is Bob, who by comparison is like a lumbering oaf, barely keeping up, and he has his like backpack and then the other little backpack off that backpack, like he's so lumpy and slow. I mean, you can't fault him. He's like not keeping up with teenage skaters doing parkour, you know? But yeah, visually it was just so fun. So many cool silhouette shots. Then they make kind of like a big leap from one roof to another where like so far they've just been kind of climbing over things. And Bob tries to follow them and he just falls. Like he just completely does not make the jump. And he falls like through a tree flat on the ground. This also felt like a video game moment. It felt like when you're like playing that Kim Possible game and you accidentally fall or something. He tries to like get his shit together and get away or whatever, but the streets are flooded with riot police, and so he gets tased and arrested kind of right away. Sensei gets a call from the skaters like, your man went down. He says, okay, meet at Sacred Heart. Now Deandra and Willa pull up to the rendezvous point, Sisters of the Sacred Beaver, I think is what it's called. And there's like a soft Spanish guitar. So this is supposed to be like the safe haven they've reached. Deandra introduces Willa as Perfidia Beverly Hills' daughter, and what appears to be like the Mother Superior nun or whoever approaches and is kind of looking her up and down skeptically. She goes nose to nose with Willa in profile, in silhouette, and Willa is very proud. She has her chin up, you know, putting on a brave face as this older woman is staring her down sort of suspiciously. She says like, do I look like my mom? And the woman says, no, but you look like her on the inside. The daughter of a rat is a baby rat. Implies that Perfidia was a rat and that they don't trust Willa. And Willa's shocked by this because as far as she knows, Perfidia was a hero who died, and everyone associated with the revolution should like welcome her as the daughter of a hero, you know? But okay, they accept Willa. They put her in this like pretty bare old stone room. Willa doesn't show any like fear or anything until she's alone in bed, and then she finally just starts to cry and she's like hugging the censor to herself under her pillow and sobbing. Again, she's just a kid and she's scared shitless and she's completely alone. I know there's like lots of different storylines happening right now, but that's what makes it so much fun. So just try to stick with me. All right. Willa's at the convent. Colonel Lockjaw knew the direction they were heading in somewhat recently, so he's going in that direction, but he doesn't know exactly where they are. Bob has been arrested. That's the state of affairs of everyone we're following right now, okay? So new character. We have a fancy blue sports car pulls up to like a big mansion, very like McMansion-y type mansion. I am famously car blind. I don't remember cars. I don't remember makes and models. It's just not something I've ever been interested in until my F1 obsession of this year, but I still don't really care about street cars. Like I kind of only care about formula cars. Anyway, this car felt important to me, and there are a lot of cars in this movie that felt important. So I did reverse Google image search the car out of curiosity of like, what sports car it was. Apparently, I'm sure people will correct me if I'm wrong, a 2013 Ford Mustang Shelby GT 500. So that feels really fitting because I feel like a Mustang is such an American car. Like that is so Republican in a way. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's a nice car, like no offense to anyone who drives a Mustang. It made a lot of sense, and especially it being blue, like very much giving Sydney Sweeney's Jeans Are Blue, you know? The music here is like a pretty abrupt break from the other action because it's just like a very soft choir singing Glory to the Newborn King, like the Christmas song. Hark, the herald angels sing glory to the newborn king. That one. And this guy is wearing like a vest, like a zip up vest over a button down. And this old lady greets her and she's like, oh, hi, Tim, how are you? And he's like, hi, Alice, like, how are you? It's all very cutesy and sweet. And then he's like, I'm running late, like, I better go. So she like guides him to the basement. He walks through this door that has this like really weird wallpaper all on the wall, like steps in like a forest path kind of. But anyway, he goes through this door and then all of a sudden he's in this weird basement that's like all white walls and it's like cavernous, like the ceiling is arched and the hallway's in a circle and there's all these just like mysterious doors and tunnels. Very weird vibes. Tim seems nervous. I'm pretty sure at this point like the music has muffled and is pretty quiet. He keeps checking his watch, like this is a very important meeting that he's late to. He finally gets to like the last door and does a secret knock and they let him in. Everyone says Hail Saint Nick as a greeting. So if we didn't get it by now, we get it. This is the Christmas Adventurers Club meeting or a Christmas Adventurers Club meeting. So we get this shot of like a pretty long room and at the end of the room there's a table where there's four other similar looking white men looking at him. He like has to like walk across the room and shake hands with everyone. I don't remember everyone's name because they all have just like really generic names, but two of the guys are the ones who met with Colonel Lockjaw at the wedding, and similarly Tim seems like he wants to impress them as well, like he's kind of a newer member or something. And then there's this really, really old guy on the other side of the table who is like kind of nonverbal for most of the meeting. Like he kind of looks half asleep. So after he shakes everyone's hand, we break the 180-degree rule pretty quickly again. And we cut to looking from the point of view of the really old guy, like from the POV looking at Tim walk in and sit down. I think the point of this is just to hammer in the idea that like Tim is kind of in the weaker position here. He's being watched, he's being assessed, and this shot like puts us in that group of men looking at Tim and assessing him. The point of the meeting, though, is they're discussing a rumor that Colonel Lockjaw has fathered a mixed race child. And remember, they had asked Colonel Lockjaw, like in their first few questions, have you ever engaged in an interracial relationship? Because their whole fucking spiel is about white supremacy. Remember, he submitted himself to a background check? They discovered that years ago, one of the French 75, Jungle Pussy, who remember Perfidia was close with, told an officer this story that, we don't know exactly what, but that Colonel Lockjaw had relations of some kind with Perfidia Beverly Hills. So this is a revelation to me when I was watching it because it was heavily implied that she was pregnant with Colonel Lockjaw's child. It cut right from the hotel scene to her pregnant with the machine gun over her baby bump and then her being really depressed and disconnected from the baby. In hindsight, it's so obvious. I don't know what to say. I just missed it because the sex scene in the hotel room was so vague. Like, I didn't think that they had sex exactly, you know? And it seems like the only person that Perfidia told the story to was Jungle Pussy, her like best friend. And she didn't tell Bob, which is understandable. Like, I can think of a million reasons why she didn't. But so for me, I was like, oh shit. It was mostly that I was confused because I didn't think that they had sex. So not only do they know about this backstory, but they know that right now Colonel Lockjaw is doing all of these raids and going after Bob and Willa because they know that he's trying to like erase the evidence of the child so that he can get in their little club, and they're pissed about this. The really old guy at the back of the table, he finally pipes up and he says, Lockjaw got his dick dirty and now he's trying to clean it and make fools of us all. Tim, we need you to make it clean. We want to be able to eat off the floor. It's so clean. So obviously this language is like really disturbing. They say lots of other like weird and disturbing things in this meeting I don't have time to get into, but it's a really good balance of like satirical and serious. I just think the language of clean and dirty is very interesting, and that is exactly what ethnic cleansing is about. That's what eugenics is about. Anyway, so Tim's like, okay, I understand you. I can do this. Cut to Willa Willa firing a machine gun, an automatic gun, at the convent outside, just like the shot, almost exactly the shot of Perfidia firing the gun over her pregnant belly. And Deandra's watching her from the sidelines. And at some point, Willa asks Deandra, was she a rat? Like about Perfidia. And she clearly feels like betrayed by this information. Side note at this point, because I haven't said it yet, I was really confused by the name Perfidia Beverly Hills, so I looked it up after. Perfidia is Spanish for betrayal, basically. But I think it has multiple meanings when it comes to Perfidia Beverly Hills. On the surface, everyone calls her a rat and say that she betrayed the organization, which yeah, she gave up names, but she also had no other choice really. And I think that most of them would have done the same. Everyone else in this movie, when interrogated, eventually does give up names or does give up the information. So it feels a bit unfairly harsh on her because none of them know that Colonel Lockjaw was stalking her and obsessed with her. And then of course, she in a way betrayed Willa by not being there for her as a mother, betrayed Bob by not being there as a partner or as a co-parent. But at the same time, ultimately she was betrayed. A lot of the power that she felt empowered by her sexuality and by her body. And we saw that in her character. But then at the same time, her sexuality and her body was used against her in this way that ruined her life. In that sense, the world betrayed her. Her body betrayed her when she was pregnant with this child as a result of rape, her own womb betraying her. So yeah, I think as much as everyone accuses her of being the traitor, I think she was also betrayed in many ways. Bob, remember Bob when he got tased after he fell off the roof? He's in a cop car, banging his head, not giving his real name, crying. And then at the police station, it's all crowded. So many people have been arrested. He says he's Jim Parker. He's 42. The woman behind the glass is trying to get him to look at her. She keeps going, okay, Jim, Mr. Parker. And then finally, kind of quietly, she says, Bob. And you could almost miss it. It was so good. We're looking at him when she says it and he looks up at her and she starts giving him clues of what to say. She's like, are you diabetic? And starts nodding at him as she says it. And he goes, yeah. Have you taken your insulin? And she's shaking her head. No. She says, okay, officer, we can't take this one. He needs insulin. We got to take him to the ER. In the ER, a nurse, or maybe it's her, I don't know, comes in and tells him, you're going to go through that bathroom door, down the hall, and out the fire escape. He says, right now? She says, right now. Sensei organized this? She says, yes, he's waiting in a car. So he goes, he just walks out of the hospital, gets into the car with Sensei, and there's gospel music almost. And they are so excited to be reunited. They take a selfie, they cheers their Miller Lights. I don't know, it's so dad vibes and so cute. They're off to the Chupacabra Hills where the rendezvous point is so he can get Willa. All right, so now Bob's back on the mission. Lockjaw is still trying to track down where Willa has been taken to. He's questioning the owner of a gas station on the road heading south. The guy tells him about the nuns nearby who grow weed. Alas, Lockjaw is closer. At the convent, Willa and Deandra are sitting at a table, at the table in Willa's room, kind of quietly. Her room is really pretty. It's this big stone room, and we have a pretty wide shot on them sitting at this round table next to the open doorway. There starts to be the quietest, least audible, tiny little rumbling noise, and Deandra brings a finger to her mouth shh, and she motions wait one sec and walks out through the doorway out of the frame. And then very quickly after, there's this crazy shot where now Willa's just sitting alone at the table, and we see a guy in fatigues with a gun come into the frame behind the doorway, and he starts walking towards the door, and then he walks through and points at Willa. And it was so tense. It was such a Call of Duty moment where there's someone else in the house and you don't know where they are. You almost expect her to somehow disappear or something to come out and save her, but no, he just finds her. In the hallway, all the nuns have been zip tied and lined up on their knees. This is a full operation. And then they drop Willa off in this big kind of empty chapel or church hall with Colonel Lockjaw sitting at the far end. And it feels like she's being thrown in with the sharks, or she's a gladiator being thrown in the arena. There's this huge orchestral music playing. She has this rage in her eyes, this defiance that looked just like Teyana Taylor as Perfidia Beverly Hills. And so she's stalking towards him. Again, they come nose to nose in profile, in silhouette. She is facing down all of the demons of the past. And he pushes her into a chair and opens this big test kit in a briefcase that looks super, I don't know, super interesting and like mechanical. It had these little pixelated screens and all these different swabs and like, I forget what it's called, the thing that spins your test tubes, like your DNA. And so he's doing this DNA test. I don't know, I just loved all the close-ups on the test and how like tactile it all was. It was cool. He like swabs both of their noses and she's so confused. She's like, what is going on? But it becomes pretty obvious that it's a DNA test. And he says, if that doesn't line up, you'll go free. But if it does, we have a problem. So she's like tied to this chair front and center, like in front of the altar. And he's sitting on a bench on the side watching her and watching the test. And it's almost comical and like awkward for a second because they're just sitting there in silence. He's like, how old are you now? Do you have a boyfriend? And like it could almost be in like another life, it could almost be an estranged parent and child reuniting under more normal circumstances, as well as like processing what's going on right now, that the man that she was told murdered her mother is now doing a DNA test to see if they're related. She asks him, did you rape her? Of course the answer is yes. But Lockjaw, oh my god, Sean Penn, I don't know how he did this. His veins were literally bulging out of his skin. Like he was like, I saw, or my sister sent me, like someone said he was like throbbing. Like his veins were bursting out of his skin and throbbing through his whole body to the point that it was like kind of obscene. Like his whole self was phallic. You know what I mean? It was disgusting. And his uniform is like super, super tight. Like everything is too tight. Like I said, it seems like it's painful to exist in his body. And like he's just bursting with this misdirected rage. And he is like inspecting her face in this really creepy way, like grabs her chin. And he says, you should put on more makeup and make yourself look pretty. I actually loved this line in the script. He hates women. He hates women. He hates black women. He hates perfidia. He hates the child. He is a hateful and insecure little worm. In this moment, even though she's totally physically like helpless, she has so much power over him and his fragile ego and fragile emotions. Like it's irrational. It also reminded me, if you know me, you know like one of my hyperfixations is Mormonism. I've never been a Mormon. It doesn't make a ton of sense, but like we don't have time to get into that right now. But it reminded me of this speech from this Mormon spiritual leader, Elder M. Russell Ballard, at the General Conference of 2015. The General Conference is like where all of the like spiritual leaders and the current prophets of the church basically touch base on what the church's beliefs are, and they give speeches and whatever. And at the General Conference in 2015, just 10 years ago, this guy says, beautiful girls, don't wander around looking like men. Put on a little lipstick now and then and look a little charming. And this is in the context of like a speech about advice for young men and women. And it is part of rape culture. It's like nonsensical, right? Because on the one hand, if you get raped, you were tempting men. You looked too sexy. So you need to look less sexy. But then if you don't look sexy enough, now you look like a man and you're not appealing to men and you won't ever find a man who can protect you from the other men who are rapists. It's full of contradictions. It doesn't make any sense. All oppressive and hateful ideologies are like this. They're full of contradictions and don't make sense. But him saying like throughout this movie that he's obsessed with black women, he loves black women, he had this like sexual fixation on perfidia, but then also abusing her and now like taking out his own self-loathing and whatever on this child who he fathered biologically. It's just like, it's disgusting. Anyway, I was thinking as I'm watching this, like she kind of looks like a queen, like holding court, sitting on a throne, and he is like a peasant. And just as I thought that, like right after I thought that, he calls her a princess. Ironically, he's like, you're such a princess. You think you're a princess. The way that grown men will project like a malicious Lady Macbeth bitchiness onto their teenage daughters who challenge them in any way really astounds me. She's sitting there dead silent, tied to a chair, and he is raging at her so hard. He's like spitting as he screams. Parts of this were funny. She says, why is your shirt so tight? He's like, I'm not gay. I'm not a homosexual. And she goes, I didn't say that, but I see the lifts in your shoes. The DNA test finishes and it is in fact a straight line. Oopsie. He is like crouching on the ground. He looks up at her from the test kit on the floor and she looks down at him from her seat. And again, it's like she's tied to a chair and yet he feels so small and he is such a worm. She looks scared though. She starts to cry, which is really sad. Bob is still in the car with Sensei. They're on their way. Bob is kind of like opening up to the Sensei as they're drinking beers like on the road. He says he never thought that Lockjaw would come back, but he had hoped that Perfidia would come back and be a mom to Willa. As a viewer, you also kind of hope Perfidia is going to come back. Like when Deandra found Willa at the school, I kind of hoped that it was perfidia, or I hope that she was taking her to perfidia, but she's not. And like, she doesn't appear in the rest of the movie. She doesn't come back. And I feel like Teyana Taylor's performance and the writing of that first part of the movie that she is in were so impactful that like, as a viewer, you completely feel her absence. And he's telling Sensei, you know, I can't do her hair, about Willa. I can't do her hair, man. And like, expressing how inadequate he feels as a father. Being a single parent is so hard, especially when that's not what you intended. There's always going to be things that as a parent you feel are like shortcomings of yours. But for him to say I can't do her hair, like, kind of pissed me off. And I chalk this up to a little bit of wallowing in self-pity. I feel like he doesn't take responsibility totally for all the things that he doesn't do for Willa, because in his mind, there are things that perfidia should have done. And that gets complicated because he doesn't realize that he's making excuses for himself, but he is. Because what do you mean you can't do her hair? First of all, her hair looked really perfect and beautiful. Her curls, her natural curls looked perfect. So she must have figured out how to do her hair herself. How do you think she figured that out? She probably went on YouTube. You could have gone on YouTube and figured out how to do her hair. Seeing like a white dad say that he can't do his half black daughter's hair and mourning the fact that her black mother wasn't around to do it, it does piss me off. I'm like, that is your failing. Should perfidia have been there? Yes, that would have been ideal, but that's not the situation you were in, and it's not the situation you're going to be in, and you can't sit around in this like state of limbo, half-assing parenthood until she comes back. You have to be the full parent now. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance here. He loves Willa. He feels a lot of guilt. He would do anything to protect her, but he has failed her in a lot of ways in terms of her like emotional and social needs. We get some piano, like Chasini type piano, Tom and Jerry type piano starting up again, and we see that there's like a cop car pretty far back trying to pull them over. They're probably speeding, and Sensei's like, you're gonna have to hit it on foot. You're gonna have to tuck and roll, jump out, and go. So he like speeds up and turns around a corner to where the police can't see them, and he counts Bob down, and Bob like won't go. He's too scared. So then he has to like jerk the car to like throw Bob off basically, and Bob like rolls down a hill on the side of the road. Sensei's the goat. Sensei really gets shit done. He really like pushes Bob literally and figuratively in a lot of these moments to like step up to the plate. Bob tumbles down the hill and he pretty quickly finds like an old car to hotwire, because my first thought was like, you can't really hotwire cars anymore because key fobs are all digital, but it was a really old car. So, and he is like his whole thing, Rocket Man, right? It's like he does electrical stuff. So he hotwires the car, drives up to this big fence and climbs the fence, and it's like high ground looking over the whole convent grounds. It's like a little walking path, and there's like an alcove or whatever on it full of little prayer stuff. Willa's running from Lockjaw in the chapel, like with the chair tied to her still. He's pissed. He grabs her. She's fighting. Bob clears the prayer paraphernalia or whatever off of the ledge and replaces them with his rifle. Symbolically, I feel like this is a rejection of the idea of sending thoughts and prayers when you have the power to actually do something, and of like going from abstraction to action. Ooh, that was poetic. I didn't even mean for that to be like that. Can't help it. Not to say that like you have to take action with a gun or with violence. I don't know if PTA is saying that. Bob is finally shaking off the dust and shaking off the like ideas and just like saving his daughter. Through the scope, Bob can see that Lockjaw puts Willa in this car, and when Lockjaw goes around to the other side of the car to the driver's side, he shoots, but he misses. Lockjaw and Willa drive away, and then the soldier guys on the ground like fire back heavy artillery fire at Bob, and he has to duck. Bob goes back to the stolen car. Lockjaw, with Willa in the car, says, in reference to perfidia, I didn't rape her. I loved her. She was a warrior. Willa says she was a rat. He says, you should respect your mother and your father. Just so weird and perverted. Like, what right do you have? Lockjaw is driving really fast and erratically through these like hilly dirt roads, which is very scary, and actually a pretty common like narcissistic abuser behavior, driving really scarily when you have someone in the car with you trying to intimidate them. Anyway, they reach like a sort of clearing, and there's facing them is this white sedan with a specially added like mirror on the driver's side, like a bigger mirror or whatever. I didn't realize on first watch, but on second watch I realized it's the same car and the same guy as who had kidnapped Howard Summerville. So he's like a bounty hunter. So the guy gets out of his car and Lockjaw gets out of the SUV, and their cars and bodies are sort of face to face, like many of the shots we've scene, and it's also very Western. Like we get a big wide shot of them staring each other down. It is kind of like a Mexican standoff. He says he needs Willa disposed of. Again, all this language of dirty and clean. He tries to say she's a murder suspect. No one will miss her. The bounty hunter guy says she's a kid. Like, I don't do kids. Why don't you do it? And he says, I can't. I'm like busy. So it's interesting that he can't kill her himself. I think he's a coward. He doesn't want to face that because he likes to maintain this like weird perverted fantasy that he loved perfidia. It was consensual and that Willa is just such a shithead, like that it's her fault that he can't be a father to her. And he even says like when he like goes to shove her into the car and she's fighting, he's like, see, you have no manners. If you had manners, maybe this could have gone differently. So yeah, he can't kill her himself. He can't face the fact that he's doing such a horrible thing. He has to maintain this illusion that he's the ultimate victim. This is what I mean when I say like this is quite a deep, personal, character-driven story, even though it is in the context of these like bigger social conversations. And it just has so much more depth, so many more layers, and it hit me emotionally so much harder than anything in Eddington did. Anyway, Lockjaw says, do you know this place? He like references an address. Get her to them and I'll pay you your daily rate. And so the guy's kind of like, all right. Lockjaw drags her out of the car, and again they have this little fight, and he says, you've got no manners, god damn it, while he's like manhandling her, trying to get her human trafficked basically. And then in the bounty hunter guy's car, Willa's still like kicking and screaming, whatever, and he is looking at her through the rearview mirror and he says, is anyone looking for you? And it kind of was like when the woman asked Bob at the police station, like, are you diabetic? Like, he wants her to say yes. He wants a reason to not do this because he feels like morally conflicted about it. She says, oh yeah, they're all looking for me, tracking me, like, you're gonna regret it, they're gonna blah 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 blah. She doesn't really know if Bob is looking for her. She doesn't know how close he is, but she's not an idiot, you know, of course she says yes. Speaking of Bob, he stops at like a roadside fruit stand or something, and in the most broken Spanish, he tries to ask the guys where a very, very bad man, very, very bad white man, and a younger black girl went. And so they kind of figure out what he's saying and tell him. And I think it's very on brand for Bob that he speaks the worst Spanish. Okay, I have in my notes here. Car chase scene begins now, baby. So this is where like the real shit gets going. I mean, okay, I'll get into it. So we get a wide shot of this bounty hunter car, the white sedan, from far away. It's driving uphill, way at the top of a steep hill from Bob. And Bob sees it in the distance and says like, okay, I got you. And he starts following. In the other direction on the road, the blue Mustang of our friend Tim from Christmas Adventures, it appears, and it pulls up next to Lockjaw's black SUV, driving back after dropping off Willa with the bounty hunter. And it pulls up next to Lockjaw. Tim gestures for him to lower his window. So Lockjaw lowers his window, and then Tim shoots him in the head with a shotgun from his driver's seat. So Lockjaw's car tumbles off the side of the road. It like flips over and rolls and everything. Tim just drives away in that blue Mustang. The bounty hunter car, the white sedan, pulls up to some house with Willa in tow. It's very sus. I felt like she was being human trafficked, like it was a sex trafficking operation, because there's all these men around coming in and out. There's a guy outside like who greets the bounty hunter, and he's like also covered in tattoos and has like a walkie-talkie or something. And he says, did Lockjaw bring this, or did Lockjaw send this, referring to Willa as this? He tells the other guys, we got a body. So just very dehumanizing language. Willa is handcuffed, sitting on a bench outside this house, like on the porch, looking scared shitless. The bounty hunter guy, he gets back into that white sedan, but he doesn't leave. He like kind of stays, and you get the sense that he's very stressed about the situation. He doesn't feel great about leaving Willa there. Tim in the Mustang drives past Bob, and he notices, because there's like no other cars on this road and it's like a fancy blue Mustang. And then pretty quickly after that, he gets to the site of the crash that Lockjaw was in. So Bob freaks out, thinking maybe Willa was in that car. He goes and looks, and he sees Colonel Lockjaw like all bloody and upside down in the driver's seat of the crash. And there's no Willa. He starts like basically just screaming, calling for her around, as if maybe she like escaped and is walking on foot somewhere. These guys pull up to the house where Willa is, and it's looking like they're getting ready to like take her or something. And the bounty hunter, who is still there watching, he gets out of his car. He walks up to the porch. He uncuffs Willa. Like he grabs the key that he had given the guy sitting outside and uncuffs Willa before the guy can like really react. He's like, dude, what the hell? And then he just shoots that guy, and then goes into the house and shoots everyone else. And meanwhile, Willa runs. He couldn't undo her zip ties because like he wouldn't have had time to do that before like they maybe shot him. So he undid her cuffs and then killed everyone. And it seems like he got shot too because there's like no more shooting happening. And so she does this cool move to get the zip ties off her feet. She gets in the car, her hand's still zip tied, and she tries to push to start, but it's not starting. Oh, I felt so nervous. So Willa has to go back, all these dead bodies around. She finds the bounty hunter shot laying on the ground, and she has to like get his keys out of his pocket, which is like obviously terrifying. She's a very brave girl. The music has like drums coming in. We're escalating. Willa is whipping that white Dodge down the open road. Okay. Both of her hands are zip tied, and there's like the sun is really bright and reflecting, and you just feel really stressed out, but she is flooring it to get out of there. She crests over this big hill. This is a super hilly open road through the desert. Like, you know, when you see those like big open roads through like a big desert, very American vibes. This is like that, but it's full of hills, which I feel like is pretty unusual. It's usually pretty like a flat road. So she crests over this big hill, and then suddenly the camera does like a POV shot almost from like the front bumper of the car, like very close to the asphalt. It's super shaky. It's a super narrow depth of field. So the depth of field is like how much is in focus. Is it like everything 10 feet out from the camera is basically in the same focus? Or if it's like a super shallow depth of field, I could have like this eyelash in focus, and then this eyelash is far enough away from the camera that it's out of focus. You know what I mean? I don't know if I explained that in a good way. Anyway, so we have a super narrow depth of field. So like there's like an inch of asphalt in front of us that's super sharp and in focus, and then like the next inch is out of focus. So you just feel this like very uncertain, scared feeling that Willa has in that car. You can also kind of see like heat waves coming off the pavement. So it's very intense, and it feels like a roller coaster simulator because it's like up and down and up and down and so close to the ground. She's checking her rearview mirror constantly. She drives away, and suddenly the blue Mustang appears. Tim's blue Mustang appears from way back, and then we get like a bird's eye kind of, but it's shaky, like handheld from the sky. It's like even God doesn't know what's gonna happen here. Like fate has not been sealed. It seems like he's getting so close behind her, like in her rear view mirror, you see that blue Mustang getting closer, but then he'll disappear behind a hill. So the cars are kind of bopping up and down the hills. We see like one come up and disappear, and then the other come up behind it and disappear, like whack-a-mole. Like you see it and then you don't. You see it and then you don't over these hills. And then suddenly a third car appears in the background behind him, and it's Bob at the top of a hill and then down. So now we've got Willa at the front, Tim in the middle, and then farther back, Bob. Willa gets to a big downhill. She floors it. She's running now. The music, I wrote down horror movie music. It was really intense, kept you so captivated. It was so cool, guys. Like the shots of the cars with the heat blurring the camera, it was so epic. Like I've never seen a car chase like that before because, okay, let me actually finish it and then I'll get more into it. Okay. Willa keeps seeing him disappear and reappear in her rear view, right? And she gets an idea. She gets to the top of a really big hill as fast as possible, like floors it all the way up the hill. And then she slams on the brakes right at the top of the hill and gets out of the car and runs. There's like a broken piece of wall on the side of the road that she lays behind with her gun. She had taken a gun from the bounty hunter guy as well, or from the car, I don't know. This was so fucking smart of her, and this was so smart from a filmmaking point of view, because I really like when movies make it possible for you to have figured out what was going to happen. It was possible for me to think in my head, okay, she just needs to get to the top of a hill and then disappear. I didn't think of it, but I don't know. I just felt like included in that thought process for her because she was seeing what we were seeing, which is this very strange and ominous and scary like peekaboo game that they were playing. I've never seen a car chase like that before. Normally, right, they're like urban. And so the dynamics and the barriers that are being introduced are other cars, streets, buildings, alleyways, or even in something like Mad Max, where you have like really cool battle scenes just in this like open desert. There's so much fucking else going on. Like it's about weapons and the engines and all of that. This was so simple. It was just a road. It was just a hilly road, nowhere else to go. This was really kind of the only answer to the puzzle. This was the only right answer to the question, and she figured it out. And I love that the cinematography was beautiful and served multiple purposes. It was stressful, and it showed intimately this unique dynamic of the chase that ultimately led to the conclusion. Tim gets to the top of the hill. He doesn't stop the car in time before rear-ending Willa's car like pretty hard, and then both cars like skid forward kind of far. Shaky handheld camera. Yeah, I would be shaky if I was Willa. Tim gets out of the car kind of disoriented from the hit, and he doesn't even have his gun in his hand. He underestimated her. He was not really prepared for a fight, but she's a lot smarter than Lockjaw, unfortunately for Tim. So Willa shouts at him the Green Acres code. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, something something. The code that she used with Deandra, and he's supposed to answer with, "We'll no longer be so goddamn relevant." That's like the next line. But he just goes, "What?" And she says it again, and he's like, "I don't." And just before he's about to say, "I don't know," she just shoots him dead. She shoots him in the head, and then she shoots him like a couple more times, and then just screams. Her adrenaline has been on max, fighting for her life. She just killed someone. Her whole life is turned upside down. Her biological father is the man who killed her mother, as far as she knows. So she doesn't have her mother in her life, and her dad her whole life has lied to her and is not her dad. Like, she's fucking freaking out, obviously. So I love that she just kind of had this like visceral scream into the void moment. After like 10 more seconds or something, Bob makes it to the top of the hill. He stops his car like kind of just in time, and the music now is kind of like soft and synthy. We hear both of them breathing really loudly. They both have their guns drawn, and she's still behind this barrier. So Bob is like kind of cautiously walking around trying to see who it is. And finally Bob sees it's her, and he drops his gun. He's so relieved. She's still shaking, and she doesn't drop her gun. And she says the Green Acres code again. And he's like, "Willa, it's me, it's your dad." It's almost like she can't see him and doesn't recognize him, like someone with like PTSD flashbacks, you know, where they don't know who you are. She is like so traumatized in this moment. And like I said, all of her beliefs and everything she knew has been twisted upside down. So she's just irrationally needing that bit of reassurance from him. Like, he's the one who taught her that code. Of course he knows that code. But she's just so shaken. It's all that she can hold on to right now. Like, that's the only thing that has kept her safe. So finally he answers it, and she screams, "Who are you?" And he just very gently keeps saying, "It's me, it's Dad, I'm your dad, it's okay." And finally she like breaks and runs to him and hugs him. You really feel scared in that moment that she might shoot him. But he doesn't seem scared for himself, really. He is so worried and confused about her, and he has all of his defenses down approaching her. And I found that really beautiful and symbolic as a parent. Like, you can feel wounded as much as you want by your child being mean to you or being judgmental of you, guilting you for failing as a parent, whatever it is. Kids can hurt your feelings, of course. But as a parent, like, you're not on equal footing. You are meant to be more worried about the fact that you've hurt your kid than about how hurt you feel that your kid has told you you've hurt them. Do you know what I mean? I feel like a lot of times abusive parents, narcissistic parents, manipulative parents, whatever, if you try to say like, "Hey, remember that time you did this thing that was abusive?" They just turn it around on you, like Lockjaw does with her, and say like, "You're disobedient, you're a bitch, you have no manners, blah, 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 blah." But what a loving parent does, like, this is why Bob is a flawed but ultimately loving parent. He puts her first, and he readily accepts his failures, and he forgets himself in the process of focusing on her and taking care of her. And he just wants her to be okay. That's what ultimately gets through to her. That's what a parent should feel like to a kid, even a teenager, even an adult kid. A parent should feel like you can finally put down your guard and stop having to protect yourself, because now they're going to protect you and take care of you. So that was a really beautiful moment when she ran to him. And then we get kind of like a choir, like almost like a opera choir vibe. He's holding her, like she's like tucked under his shoulder as they drive away. And he's kind of just like, "It's going to be okay. It's okay." And then suddenly, what do we see in the background but Colonel Lockjaw walking down the road? It was like fading from out of focus into focus. Like, while watching the movie, I wrote down that he was walking like a zombie with a stick up its ass. So this whole movie has like such a weird stiff way of moving around, like in his weird ballooned body. But this especially was like such a weird stiff sort of strut where he's like swaying his hips and like swinging his arms, but like walking really stiffly with his legs. I just would love to be on set that day and see Sean Penn pull that out and have PTA and the whole crew be like, "Perfect, do that again." So he can't be killed. Another parallel to Eddington, this reminded me of how hard it was to kill Joe in Eddington. When I talked about that, I likened it to how it's really hard to kill misinformation, hatred, violence, all these like sort of bugs that infect peaceful society. You can't just like shoot it dead. It always comes back. And I think Lockjaw is a very similar metaphor. He embodies white supremacy, patriarchy, hatred, and as pathetic as he also is like hard to get rid of. So cut to him in like some high-rise office building, like a sterile office, and he's talking to the Christmas Adventure guys and they're asking him questions. His face is kind of messed up from being shot by their operative. Yeah, they're basically questioning him about his relationship with Perfidia. His answer to this, he says, "Gentlemen, I have engaged the enemy face to face in battle and in the dark alleys and shadows of espionage. I was once raped in reverse." They look at each other and then they look back at him and they're like, "Could you explain how that might work for us?" "The enemy employed deception. I was drugged, and while unconscious, my brain was not working, but my power was. I believe it was taken advantage of." What kind of proof do you have of this? Like, since you were unconscious. I love that role reversal of like a rapist being hit with the, well, how do you know? He says, "I don't know it to be true, but I suspected when I awoke. There was sensitivity in a private place, and there was residue of an interaction." Disgusting way of talking about sex. "I believe she was a sperm thief." "A semen demon?" "That's correct." So this is like a conversation that they have, that like women will manipulate men for their sperm. And it seems like, especially in the context of like a black woman wanting a white man's sperm, it was really weird and disgusting. I did laugh at semen demon though. "Colonel Lockjaw, what would be the purpose of the enemy raping you in reverse?" "They saw the power of my mind and body. They desired it." And the guys look at each other. "Congratulations, Steve. You are a Christmas adventurer." "Oh, mommy. Thank you, sir." The final straw where they stopped having any thread or possibility of credence to his story is when his explanation for why this happened was that his mind and body were so powerful and desirable that the enemy wanted to reproduce with him. They were like, okay, well, that can't possibly be true. The rest of this can be true, okay? Maybe you were raped in reverse, but it definitely was not because they thought you were so strong and amazing and wanted your sperm, because you're fucking weird. And like, he wants it so bad, he doesn't notice anything suspicious about this. He doesn't question the fact that like it was them who shot him. I don't know if he even realizes that. And he doesn't question the way that they like look at each other as they're saying this. He's just like, okay, awesome. Finally, I'm a Christmas adventurer. They go, okay, I'm going to show you around headquarters. I'm going to show you your new office. And it's such a stereotypical sterile office building. Low-key like triggered me to my corporate office building that's like all glass and fluorescent and light and sterile. And as they're walking through, we see them in all these like reflections of the glass. I don't know, just all these silhouettes and shadows and reflections of them walking through the corporate office. And they walk him into this totally empty corner office with a view. All of the nearby offices are empty. It's kind of like suspiciously empty. And he sits in this like office chair at that empty desk with all the empty shelves and puts his feet up like he's in heaven. Like, this is what heaven is. Because to these people, heaven, like the ultimate, really is a corner office with a view and other powerful white men shaking your hand and saying you're pretty cool, guy. Like, that's the pinnacle of life. So the guy's like, oh, sorry, I forgot your key. I'll be right back. And he closes the door. And Lockjaw like barely even notices. But as the audience, you hear the sound go super muffled. Like, the sound gets super quiet when he closes the door. I thought the room was like soundproofed and they were gonna like blow him up or something. After a few minutes, like nothing happens. And then we hear a hissing noise and the camera goes on the ceiling vent and you see a little bit of gas come out. And he pretty quickly passes out / dies from the gas. I mean, the imagery of them gassing him, very Nazi of them. And I think it was also fitting because it was like the mirror of him throwing the gas down the tunnel as Bob was escaping. Now he feels he has like made it and escaped or whatever. He's in this great office and he gets gassed. They kill him. And then this like hazmat team comes in and gets him. I have always been scared of like hazmat clothes, like hazmat teams ever since Monsters, Inc. The scene in Monsters, Inc. where like one of the monsters is contaminated with a human sock and they have to like call in the hazmat team is the scariest scene in that movie. It has haunted me my whole life. I'm not kidding. Anyway, we get a shot of his like watery reflection in profile, what's left of him. And then we're having a conversation with Bob and Willa kind of interspliced with Lockjaw's body being taken care of. Remember, he told the bounty hunter he wanted to dispose of Willa. So now we see his body get like pushed down a trash chute, which was so satisfying. But then it turns out it wasn't a trash chute. They dumped him into an incinerator, and we see his face, like his dead face, staring out through a little window as he gets incinerated. It was kind of like the witches in Hocus Pocus. I mean, it was just poetic justice. He was killed so many times. He was shot, his car crashed upside down, then he was gassed, then he was burned. If you think about it, maybe like shot in the head, gassed, incinerated, killing his mind, his body, and then his spirit. Something like that. I don't know. I can't think of the exact way I would interpret those different killing methods, but it was just gratifying to see him really get dead, you know? And back at home at their kitchen table again, Bob tells Willa, like, I'm sorry, like I kept so much from you. I wanted to protect you. I didn't want you to feel sad or confused, but I want you to know about your mother. And I think this was a really human moment for Bob too, because like the reality is that kids pick up on everything and they're going to be sad and confused whether or not you tell them the big scary truth. I don't know. I totally understood his like impulse to protect her from that whole world, but I can also understand how that introduced its own problems of her like feeling distant from him and not understanding her background. So he gives Willa a letter from her mom. They're both very emotional, and he tells her, you know, go, it's okay, you can go read it alone in private. Again, that's like such a loving and empathetic thing for a parent to do, is to give a kid, especially a teenager, respect and privacy. It really is like seeing them as a human and treating them as a human. She goes into her bedroom to hear the letter, and we hear Teyana Taylor's voice, like in a voiceover reading the letter as we watch Willa. And it's mostly questions in the letter. She opens it with Dear Charlene, because that's the name that she gave her. She says, is it too late for us after all our lives? I don't really know what that means. Is it too late for us after all our lives? I guess, is it too late for us to have a relationship after the multiple lives we've lived? Are you happy? Do you have love? What will you do when you get older? Will you try to change the world like I did? We failed, but maybe you will not. Someday when it's right and it's safe, you will find me. Please send a kiss to your dad, my ghetto Pat. Love, your mom. Oh, this made me emotional. I don't know how to feel about this letter. Like, it's like complicated because you can hear the pain in Teyana Taylor's voice and Perfidia's voice. At the same time, at no point in this letter does she apologize. She doesn't say, I'm sorry for not being there for you. Also, saying like, one day you will find me, it feels unfair. Like, why should she find you? You know, why should your daughter have to come and find you to have a relationship? I understand these are like weird circumstances, but just in general, like you feel that this is Perfidia's best, maybe, is feeling some kind of unspoken remorse for her absence, feeling sad about her absence, and genuinely in her heart, like hoping and wishing for her daughter to be happy, but maybe believing that her daughter is better off without her. I think Willa also feels kind of complicated about it. Oh, I wrote down, this reminded me of, if anyone saw Kneecap, such a good movie, I think it was 2024, Kneecap, the Irish movie. One of the boys had a father in the IRA who was like so dedicated to the cause that he really wasn't a father or a husband or a partner. Like, he was so consumed by his dedication to the cause. And I feel like Perfidia is similar, but it's more complicated with her because of lockjaw and everything. Bob is tearing up. He's like flashing back to them in bed with a newborn baby, what a normal family life with all three of them could have been if they weren't basically at war. And he just seems so profoundly sad about it. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry. He's so sad about it. And you really feel that at this point, I feel like he's grown past a little bit feeling sad for himself and feeling sorry for himself. And he, at this point, I think he really feels sad for Willa that she didn't get that. And Willa goes and gives him a big hug when she's done reading. I thought this was really beautiful too. And like having nothing spoken between them, because it doesn't need to be said, but I think it gave Willa some little bit of closure that her mom, that she always imagined as this amazing hero and martyr, was alive somewhere and was in some way okay with writing her this letter to say, like, I hope you're happy and I hope you have love and one day we might meet. Like, nothing could ever meet the expectations of what you would hope a parent you don't know would be like. As touching and moving as the letter is in some ways, it's also a closure and a reality check that the person who really has been there is Bob. For all of his failures, like, he loves her and he's there. He's always been there. He is her stability. He's her rock. I mean, she had very valid gripes with him. She was never like unfair or unfairly angsty towards him or anything, but I think it's easy to take things out on the person closest to you or the person you feel the safest with. Like, it's very normal, I think, for teenagers to take out misplaced anger on their parent. With her mom not being there, it's pretty easy to have imagined her mom as this amazing, perfect hero and everything would have been perfect if her mom was there. I think normally, like, this is gender's reversed. Like, most of the time it's a single mom and an estranged dad. I think she can have empathy for her mom and she'll process that over time. But right now, I think she's feeling a lot of empathy for her dad, for the fact that he lost this woman too, and for the fact that like he would do anything for her. All right. So we cut to sometime in the near future and she's like teaching him how to use an iPhone because now he can stop being a paranoid freak and he can like live life. He can like live a normal life. He's been like liberated kind of by this whole saga. And he keeps like switching from the front camera to the back camera and trying to take a selfie, and he's like failing to take a selfie. And it was just cute and funny, but I also feel like it's kind of a metaphor for how he's now struggling to form an identity. He's like finding a new image of himself and remaking himself, and is like for the third time kind of being reborn into this new identity of him as just a normal guy, a civilian, a dad. There's like a radio going in the corner and it says something about a protest in Oakland, like we're all meeting up in Oakland, whatever. Willa jumps up and grabs her things to go. So presumably she's like tapped into the remnants of the organization or whatever it was. Remember how what's his face had the radio show when he got kidnapped? She's plugged into that network now. But yeah, she grabs her things to go. It's pouring rain, but she doesn't even hesitate. And Bob says, be careful. But he seems to have mellowed out so much. Like the reaction he had to her going to a school dance before, where he acted like she was entering an active war zone, versus now when she is arguably entering an active war zone. He's pretty chill. He's like, all right, be safe. And she says, I won't. A little corny, but I liked it. People clapped a little bit in the theater, which was cute. And then the soundtrack starts playing American Girl. Oh, yeah. And it was great. It was really like a upbeat kind of ending, a hopeful ending, which I appreciate. And my last note in my notebook from the first viewing was, that was fucking wild, and I loved it. And yeah, I stand by that. That's basically my take on One Battle After Another. Everyone take a guess right now how much raw audio I've recorded so far. Take a guess. It's 4 hours and 37 minutes of raw content I'm going to have to edit down. But thank you for your patience with me. I loved this movie. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited for it to hopefully get the recognition and awards that it deserves, which I'm sure it will, because Paul Thomas Anderson is always given his flowers, I feel, and so is Leo. But hopefully Teyana Taylor, Jason Finity, Regina Hall, who plays Deandra, I hope they all get their flowers and their awards as well. Oh, another thing was interesting is at the end of the movie, like when they're walking Lockjaw to his office, they go like, it's empty now, but we'll let you decorate it however you want. A man's taste defines him, don't you think? And I only realized the second time, like that's kind of a double entendre. They're talking about how his quote unquote taste in women defines him to them. There were so many little lines like that. I mean, I could talk about this movie for even longer. My favorite 2025 releases overall so far are this, Sinners, and Sorry Baby. And they're all like very different in genre and tone from each other. And I love them for different reasons. But yeah, those are my favorites. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if I missed anything. Okay, that's it for this episode of the pod. I'll be back so soon, I promise. This time I will. Also, let me know if you have any movies you're dying for me to cover, because I would be happy to look into suggestions. Thank you. Bye.